Hello and thank you for choosing this clean historical Western romance from Indiana Wake. Before we begin, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Your support helps us keep sharing more wonderful stories for free. Now, settle in and journey back to the Old West, where love, courage, and second chances are waiting to be found. Copyright Indiana Wake. A New Start to Love by Indiana Wake. Chapter 1. Jonathan Bamber had been staring vaguely across his consulting room in silence for some time. His wife, Caroline, had let him contemplate for as long as she could manage without needing to hear his voice. "Honey, are you still in there?" she asked with a gentle laugh, and Jonathan could tell she was trying with all her might to mask her own anxieties. Of course, she would be every bit as anxious as him, maybe even more so. She was a mother to 5 girls, after all, and their fading fortunes were stealing her sleep as well as they were stealing his. "I'm still here, my love. Although, I'm not sure there's any point in being here. In this consulting room, I mean. What's the point? We haven't seen a single patient all day. We didn't see a single patient the day before that." He sighed. He was utterly defeated. "Well, we did see Mrs. Molson on Monday, that's something," Caroline said, and he could see just how hard she was trying. If only his beautiful wife didn't have to suffer. In all this mess, she had done nothing wrong. Caroline had worked hard at his side for years, dealing with his patients, taking on a good deal of the nursing duties and office management even as she was raising their 5 daughters. She deserved better than this, and it was tearing Dr. Jonathan Bamber apart. "Honey, Mrs. Molson is almost 80 and hanging on by a thread. I can't keep everything going here based on little more than Mrs. Molson's continued patronage. I wish I could, she sure is a dear," he added, hoping his wife wouldn't think him callous. He was just riddled with fear and anxiety, pure and simple. "Is it really as bad as all that?" Caroline was close to tears. Jonathan studied her sadly, a beautiful woman of 40 who still had rich chestnut hair and youthful blue eyes. He could see, however, where worry and sleeplessness were each taking their toll, digging little lines around her eyes and across her forehead. "If we don't sell now, we'll have nothing left to sell. The debts will just keep mounting, and we won't even have the choice to cut our losses a year from now. The Logans have taken everything with their lies, but their lies carry weight. The weight of those lies seemed to press him down, and it would be so easy to give in. Only he couldn't, he would find a way to save his family. As long as I stay in Boston, I will get nowhere as a doctor. I know it's hard to hear, but I can't hold the truth back from you any longer. I think we have to prepare the girls," he said with a sigh, lowering his head for a moment until the threat of his own tears of pain and frustration had passed. The Logans were Boston's premier family. They had done very nicely out of the economic crisis of 1837 and, a little over 3 decades later, continued to go from strength to strength. Jonathan had been as seduced by them as any other person of sense and ambition in town. Thrilled when they decided to have him take over the medical care of their entire family. It was a good life back then, and he was a regular feature in some of the finest dining rooms in Boston. Until the old man had died. Prepare them? But for what? What are we to tell them, Jonathan? That we are going to be homeless? Despite her strength and determination, tears began to run down her face. "No, we will not be homeless, I just won't allow it. No, we must prepare them for moving away from Boston." The moment had come, and he knew it. Away from Boston? But to go where? To live on what? "There's a position for a town doctor in a place called Blue Sky Falls," he began. "Blue Sky Falls? Where is that?" The fact that he could see hope still shining through the fear in her eyes was heartbreaking to Jonathan. He knew he had to do everything in his power to make this work for them all, especially his wife. "It's a mining and farming town in rural Colorado," he said, and waited a moment, trying to gauge her reaction by her expression. "It's far enough away that nobody will know us. The Logans won't have the same reach. We'll have somewhere to live and, if it goes well, we'll buy the house and consulting rooms as soon as we're settled. I know it's a long way off and so different from the world we know now, but at least it'll be a world we have a place in. Wouldn't it be better to find a way to stop the Logans spreading their lies? Or to stop people believing them?" It had been 2 years since Jedediah Logan, a man of almost 70, had passed away under Jonathan's care. The man's heart had been failing for so long, and any other family on earth would have accepted the sad prognosis. But Peter Logan, the old man's son, had been raised in some privilege. He was of the type who thought that money could buy anything, even a few extra years on earth, when any other man might have been expected to pass quietly away. Peter Logan had applied such pressure, offering his own theories of how his father's life might be prolonged. Ridiculous theories posited by a man with no medical understanding whatsoever. He was, however, a man of such wealth and importance that nobody had ever challenged him, and so, when Dr. Jonathan Bamber had done just that, Peter Logan had turned nasty. He had demanded Jonathan try every pointless scheme or remedy suggested to him by men who were little better than snake oil salesmen. As a doctor, Jonathan could not go against all he had learned nor the oath he had taken. He had refused to give false hope and subject a tired, sick old man to endless alleged cures, which would see him nauseous, vomiting, and suffering even more. It was wrong. When Jedediah had quite naturally died, Peter Logan began a vendetta of such proportions that Jonathan had barely a patient to his name and, after 2 years of such persecution, almost nothing left but his Boston home. "I've been trying for 2 years, Caroline. The Logans are just too powerful. I know there are those out there who don't believe I did anything wrong. Probably most of them know it. But that doesn't make a shade of difference when they're all too scared to go against Peter Logan, does it? Having them know the truth won't put food on the table. Then we'd better speak to the girls sooner rather than later." Caroline rose from the seat behind her small desk and crossed the room to her husband. As Jonathan kept to his seat, Caroline leaned down and wrapped her arms around him, kissing the top of his head. "We're a family and we'll get through this. If this is what's needed to save us, then this is what we'll do. Thank you, my love. I don't think I'd still be here without your support. And you, my love. You'll always have my love no matter where we live." Chapter 2. Mama, when are we going to stop? "We're so tired, and I need to wash this dust out of my eyes," Janie, their oldest daughter, complained. "Is the whole of the West this dusty?" She looked at her parents in turn, her pain clear to Jonathan. As a woman of 20 years, he would have ordinarily expected better from Janie. But her heart was broken, and the move was only making that break deeper still. Where once he might have chastised her for her petulance, he smiled warmly now and tried to give her the love and understanding she needed. Despite the fact that she and her beau had been parted for some weeks, still, she'd had to leave behind a man she loved, and Jonathan wouldn't forget it, ever. The man was not good enough for her, he had dropped her because of him and the trouble, but that didn't make the heartbreak any less. "We're stopping at a place called Drakesville soon, honey," Caroline said in such a caring, motherly tone that Jonathan knew they were of the same mind. They generally were, and it had made their marriage a wonderfully close one. Janie fell silent, staring out of the window of the stagecoach, her eyes glazed with waiting tears. The journey had been long and arduous. The steam train which had taken them a good part of the way had been uncomfortable, the air seeming always filled with soot. But it was, they discovered, preferable to the rickety stagecoaches bumping along through the rough, rural terrain as they inched their way further west. When they arrived at Drakesville, the place they were due to stay for the night, Janie had jumped down from the stagecoach without waiting for assistance. Jonathan felt his heart fall. He hoped she wasn't forever lost to them. The family took just what they needed for the night and made their way into the boarding house to clean up and settle down for a while. The two youngest girls, Carly and Susie, seemed content enough. They were just 13 and 10, respectively, the age when a child accepted changes and adapted at speed. Cynthia, their middle daughter, was quiet by nature. A mature girl of 15, she was more apt to keep her own counsel, which made it difficult to know how she felt about anything. Maria was a treasure, just 17 years old, with a tendency to look for the good in everything, even if she had questions and misgivings. Which left Janie. The oldest but by far the daughter Jonathan had most concerns for in all of this. "This sure is a nice room, Mama," Susie said with excitement, charging about the boarding house in search of adventure. "That's because you don't realize we're never going home again," Janie said waspishly, her customary patience and kindness towards the younger girls seemingly evaporated. "I do too," Susie said defiantly. "We had to move because of that man trying to hurt Daddy's business. I know we're never going back." Janie didn't respond to her sister, she just sighed and drifted away into the bedroom the girls were all to share overnight. "Can we go outside, Mama?" Susie asked excitedly. "It's still daytime." "All right, but don't go far, and take Carly with you," Caroline said with a smile. "I'll go too, Mama," Cynthia said, and Jonathan could have kissed her for taking the extra stress away from Caroline. "I'll stay here with Janie," Maria said sadly before she wandered into the bedroom. "We sure do have fine girls," Jonathan said when he and Caroline were finally alone. "Janie needs Maria now more than anyone. They're closest in age, I guess," Caroline said and walked into his arms. "It'll be all right, honey. We're together, that's what matters most right now. What would I do without you by my side?" As he was about to kiss her, the door to their rooms flew open, and the three younger girls came flying in, excitement riding high. Jonathan immediately saw the source of that excitement in the form of a small, hairy, wriggling puppy. "Who's going to explain this one?" he asked with amusement, his arm around his wife. "We found him outside, Daddy. He's all alone, and he's too little to look after himself," Susie said, getting straight to the point. "I see," Jonathan said, teasing them by not giving in immediately. "Oh, Daddy, can we keep him?" "Can we, Mama?" Carly joined in, tears of sadness already threatening to burst forth. "Well," he began, looking at Caroline, who was nodding almost imperceptibly. "All right, but you've got to take care of him. He's your responsibility, girls, not mine and not your mama's." "Agreed," he said, knowing that the three of them would have agreed to anything at that moment. "Yes," they all shouted as one. "Well, I reckon you're going to need a name for the scruffy little thing," Jonathan said, smiling and pleased for the small respite from cares which the puppy seemed to represent. "Scruffy," Susie yelled with excitement. "Let's call him Scruffy." "Scruffy it is," Jonathan said and laughed. "Let this be the first of many good things on this trip." Chapter 3. The Bamber family had been in Blue Sky Falls just 2 days when he made the journey to the neighboring town of Grayling Plains. There was so little distance between the towns that it struck Jonathan as one big town rather than two smaller ones. Certainly, too large an area for one doctor to cover, which was exactly what Dr. David Lindstrom of Grayling Plains had been doing for a year now, by all accounts. He quickly checked the address again before reaching out and knocking at the door of a large white, painted wooden house. It was neither a wealthy home nor an impoverished one, leading Jonathan to immediately suspect that there was plenty of doctoring work in this part of Colorado without every patient being able to pay the full amount for it. Well, he'd never become a doctor solely for the money, he knew that. "You must be Dr. Bamber," a man in his late 40s, prematurely gray, smiled as he opened the door. "Come on in, I'm Dr. David Lindstrom." "It sure is nice to meet you, Dr. Lindstrom." Jonathan held out his hand the moment the two of them came to a halt in a cozy and appealing square drawing room. "It's nice to meet you too, surely it is. I'd go as far as to say I've been praying for your appearance for a year now." He ushered Jonathan into a seat and poured them both a drink of fruit tea from a pitcher which was already set out on a low table in front of the couch. "You've been a busy man?" Jonathan asked with a laugh. "I sure have. Neither one is a big town, but add them together and I haven't been able to assure myself a Sunday off for many months now." "Well, I'm ready to get started immediately." "You've only been here a day or two, haven't you? Don't you and your family need a little time to settle in?" He was a kindly man, a man whom Jonathan felt immediately comfortable with. "My wife, Caroline, is seeing to all that. And two of my daughters are certainly old enough to help her out. I'm keen to get going again, if I'm honest. I must admit, I sure was surprised to hear that the new doctor at Blue Sky Falls was coming all the way over from Boston. I would have thought you had your pick of clients there, Dr. Bamber." The question was one which was bound to be asked, and yet Jonathan was caught off guard by it, nonetheless. If he was going to settle here, he'd need the full support of Dr. Lindstrom, he knew that. Yet how could he expect the man's full support if he did not give that same man his own full honesty? Even though he'd already decided to be open, still, he knew it was about to be a very difficult conversation for him. "I had my pick of clients for many years, Dr. Lindstrom, until I picked the wrong one." "Oh?" Dr. Lindstrom raised his eyebrows. "A wealthy family, an entitled family, really," he began, and was pleased to see Dr. Lindstrom nodding his recognition of the type. And when the old patriarch was nearing the end, his heart failing irreparably, his son decided that he knew better than I. He was taking advice from goodness knows who, but he pitched idea after idea, all of them foolish, most of them undoubtedly uncomfortable for the old man, and he wouldn't take no for an answer. "I am assuming that you told him no, nonetheless?" "I did, indeed." "And the man died a natural death, the sort of death that no man on earth can do anything to prevent, even a good doctor?" "He did." "I'm not sure you need to explain much further," Dr. Lindstrom said, and smiled encouragingly, something which Jonathan hadn't been expecting for a moment. "He blamed me for his father's death, despite the fact that the old man was almost 70 and had been living on borrowed time for a good 10 years of that. But they were the sort of family with the kind of wealth which nobody argues with. He immediately withdrew his entire family from my care, but it seemed that wasn't enough for him. He put pressure on almost all my patients to withdraw similarly, and, I am bound to say, most of them did just that. It's been a very long 2 years, Dr. Lindstrom, 2 years in which I could have been helping people. And so, you come here to Colorado to start again, so to speak." Dr. Lindstrom couldn't have been more understanding if he tried. "I left it too long, really. My pride got the better of me, and, like most men, I decided that to move on and start again was the same thing as turning tail and running. Unfortunately, my family suffered more and more on account of it, suffering that I might have prevented if I'd had the foresight to make such a plan sooner. Well, I reckon 2,000 miles between here and Boston ought to do it, don't you? Dr. Lindstrom winked at him. I appreciate your honesty and your openness, but I really don't see any reason that anyone in Blue Sky Falls needs to hear of it. They're good people, but sadly often easily influenced by matters they don't always understand. If I had any doubts, I can assure you I would continue to minister to the two towns for a while longer, but I reckon I know just the kind of privileged patient you're talking about. There's certainly few and far between in a place like this, that's for sure, but I did my time in New York as a much younger man and I sure did come across folks of that ilk. I can do no more than thank you for your understanding, Dr. Lindstrom. And I really am keen to get started straight away. Jonathan felt his own relief as a deep and swirling emotion and was fighting to control it. Well, tomorrow morning, then? Dr. Lindstrom said with a broad smile. Tomorrow morning. Chapter 4. Jonathan made his way back to his new house in Blue Sky Falls with something of a spring in his step. The very thing which he had thought might prove itself to be a hurdle had been nothing of the kind, and he began to wonder if things might really turn out for the best in the end. He stood outside their new home for a moment, looking up at it, studying it. It was wooden, painted a very pleasing and pretty pale blue, with a small garden on all sides and a low white fence. It was half the size of their fine brick-built home in Boston, but he couldn't think about that. He couldn't think about everything he'd lost at the hands of Peter Logan. It wouldn't help any of them now. He walked up the narrow path and in through the front door, announcing his arrival with a cheerful shout, "I'm home." "How did it go, honey?" "How was Dr. Lindstrom?" Caroline looked apprehensive, her pale blue eyes meeting his as she searched for news. "He was a nice man, Caroline." "A very understanding man," he said, raising his eyebrows and nodding. Letting her know without saying it out loud that he and the doctor from Grayling Plains had discussed their problems in Boston at length. "He was understanding about all of it?" Caroline went on, seemingly keen to have it confirmed. "All of it," he said and took her face in his hands before resting his forehead against hers for some minutes. They simply stood there, both of them relieved that another step had been taken in the right direction. "How are the girls?" "The younger ones are fine, more excited than anything else. I think they look out at all this wild countryside and see endless possibilities for play. Cynthia doesn't say anything at all, but she seems contented enough. I think Maria would like the place if she didn't have her hands full with Janie." "Is Janie still not speaking to you?" "She's not speaking to you either," Caroline said, teasing him a little even though it was so clear to him that her heart was breaking for her oldest daughter. "Do you think we should have told her?" Jonathan said, wondering if the truth of the situation would do anything to help his daughter now. That the man she loved, the man she thinks she would be with now if she'd just stayed in Boston and had a little time to work on it, had already set his sights on another? "No, I think that would just make her more miserable." "And that's if she believes us, of course," Caroline said, her blue eyes shining with sadness. You're right," he said, finally removing his forehead from hers and kissing her briefly on the lips. "It's a big change for them. It's a big change for all of us. And I reckon big changes can be accepted with time. That's all we need, honey, just time." Jonathan hoped she was right. Blue Sky Falls was certainly a far cry from the more sophisticated streets of Boston. It was a one-road town, and he was certain that the stores and local activities would fall far short of everything his daughters had known before. It was a town much like any other in the West. People worked hard, but there were signs of poverty here and there. He gathered that most of the population lived around the edges of the main street, on farms, on ranches, or in impoverished housing for those who didn't have farms and ranches of their own. And then, of course, there was the mine, the workings of which rose high enough to be seen from just about anywhere in town. He'd never worked in a mining town before, that was for sure, and he knew that such working conditions brought with it new challenges in terms of the health and well-being of those who made their living that way. So, when do you actually start? Caroline took his hand and led him through to the kitchen. It was a large square room with a table in the center. No more were they to have a separate dining room the way they had in Boston. Jonathan wondered how long he would be presented with the little details which marked the great chasm between his old life and his new one. Tomorrow morning. If you don't mind, I'll leave you to it in here to keep unpacking. I need to go into the consulting rooms and see what needs doing. I guess I'd better get things straight so that I'm ready first thing. You never know, I might even have a patient tomorrow, he said and chuckled. Well, you get straightening out in there, and I'll be along shortly. I'm sure the place will need a good dust if nothing else. We're in this together, remember? The practice comes first, and the house can wait another day, can't it? I love you, Caroline, he said as he settled himself down at the table, eyeing the plate of bread and butter that Caroline had already prepared. I love you too, honey. And at least you don't have far to go out to work in the morning, she said and smiled broadly, trying to see the best in everything. The consulting rooms were housed in a single-story building that butted up against the house. With no adjoining doors, at least it would still feel like a separate place, even if he had only to walk out of his front door and in through the door of the consulting rooms. We're going to make it, I promise. I know, Jonathan. I know it, honey. Chapter 5. At the end of his first day as the doctor of Blue Sky Falls, Jonathan couldn't have been more pleased. He'd only had 4 patients, it was true, but it was 4 more than he had expected so early on into his new life. 3 of them had genuine, but minor complaints. The 4th had no complaint whatsoever barring a desperate need to find out a little about the new family so that she might be the first with the news. Nonetheless, he hadn't minded. Curiosity amongst the locals was to be expected, and at least the woman had left with the idea that the new town doctor was a decent enough man. That was the sort of gossip he could live with, that was for sure. Caroline had been in and out of the consulting rooms all day, her mood improving with every story about each new patient. When Jonathan finally walked back into their new home, it was to be greeted by the smell of something wonderful cooking. So, they were to celebrate. It was about time they had something to celebrate. That sure smells good, honey, Jonathan said as he made his way into the kitchen. Caroline, her fine form wrapped in a thick cotton apron, was peering into a pan of vegetables bubbling on the top of the stove. She was ably assisted by Cynthia, their middle daughter, leaving Jonathan wondering where his 2 eldest were. Where are Janie and Maria? He asked, realizing that this was the first stab of worry and doubt he'd felt all day. They're just sitting out on the porch, Jonathan. Jane's been really upset today, and I just can't seem to reach her. She loved that boy so much, Jonathan, if only there was a kind way to tell her that he never deserved her. I know. He kissed Caroline's cheek and wandered out through the kitchen door onto the porch beyond. There, on a large wooden bench, sat his 2 eldest daughters. Janie looked up at him, her face a little red, and her eyes showing clear signs of having spent a good part of the day crying. Maria looked exhausted, that big heart of hers no doubt taking in every ounce of her sister's pain and feeling it as if it were her own. How are you settling in, girls? Jonathan asked cautiously, standing a few feet from them and leaning back against the wooden rail which ran all around the edge of the porch. We're doing all right, Daddy, Maria said in a tired and kindly way. You too, Janie? He asked, determined to have his older daughter at least look him in the eye. What do you want me to say, Daddy? That I'm thrilled to be here? Because I'm not, I'm really not. I know you're not, Janie, but we didn't have a choice. I'm so sorry for everything you suffered. You don't know what it cost me to see it, to know what this move would do to you. I suppose you think I'd never have patched it up with him, that it didn't make any difference anyway, she said, her sadness giving way to the mild accusation. As far as that's concerned, honey, I don't know what to think. I didn't know then, I don't know now. I reckon only you can know the answer to that deep down, after all. He knew it was a somewhat harsh answer, even if it had been gently delivered. Janie had no response for him, her face just crumbled into a mask of misery, and she closed her eyes against the tears which were already falling. She was heartbroken, his beloved first child, and Jonathan Bamber would have given anything to take that pain from her and plant it squarely inside his own chest. He knew there was no sense in telling her that life would go on, that she would meet a fine man here in Colorado and be so in love one day that she would hardly remember the boy from Boston who'd broken her heart. This wasn't the time for her to hear it, for he knew there was nothing he could say that would make her believe it. She simply had to ride out this pain, to live it, to feel every bit of it. It was the only way for her to be free in the end, however much her father couldn't bear to see it. "Oh, hey, stop that," Maria said in an urgent and loud whisper as she leaned forward in the porch seat. Jonathan followed her gaze and realized that Scruffy, the puppy they had inherited in Drakesville, was playfully pulling at the hem of Janie's dress. His thick chocolate-brown curls were light and seemed to float in the breeze, moving as he moved, swaying this way and that as his excited little body wriggled. Janie reached down and gently pushed him away, but Scruffy was undeterred. He stood in front of her, foursquare, his tail wagging so hard that his entire body moved with it in an unbearably cute ripple effect. His mouth hung open, and his tongue dangled as he panted with excitement. Janie stared at him for a moment, and Jonathan realized that she had finally stopped crying. Scruffy had distracted her well and truly, and Jonathan fancied that the little pup's determination to get Janie's attention went deeper than the simple need to play. Scruffy lurched forward, his little mouth fixing upon Janie's petticoat. Before Janie could even protest, Scruffy was already tugging backward, the front end of his body bowed, his rear end high in the air as his tail waved like a flag. "Scruffy," Janie said, her voice high-pitched as her face began to break into a smile, despite herself. "Scruffy, stop it," she went on, but the pup would not give in. Finally, Janie laughed. She looked down at that beautiful brown little ball of fluff and laughed for the first time since they'd left Boston. How glad Jonathan was that they'd found that tiny stray that day, for it would all be worth it for just that one moment. Chapter 6. "Well, that sure was a busy day," Jonathan said, several weeks later, when he had seen no less than 12 of the Blue Sky Falls townsfolk. "As always, I couldn't have done it without you." "Well, it's nice to get to know them, isn't it?" Caroline said. "And I enjoyed it, I really did. I could even see myself getting really friendly with one or two of the ladies who came in today. It would be nice, wouldn't it? It sure would be nice to have life finding its level again, that's the truth," he said as he pulled down the shutters over the large window and the small pane of glass in the door. He took Caroline into his arms, holding her tightly and staring down into her beautiful face. He really couldn't have done any of it without her. She had supported him unstintingly for more than 20 years. But as he held her there, he couldn't help but think of the last years and how the worry and fear had seemed to sap the romance that had always been such a feature of their life together. He realized now as he felt her soft and perfect in his arms, that his old sense of romance was returning. The gamble he'd made had paid off, and the survival of the Bamber family seemed assured once more. It was a different sort of life, and there was certainly nowhere near the money nor the trappings of his success in Boston, but they were saved, and he knew it. "What are you doing?" Caroline asked teasingly when he pulled her closer still and began to run his hand down her back. "You know what I'm doing, woman," he said humorously. "Well, that's just going to have to wait until later, I'm afraid." Janie promised to get the meal started, and I promised not to leave her to it. "Come on, we've got to go back into the house," she said, somewhat regretfully. "All right, in a minute," he said, holding her as tight as ever as he kissed her passionately. "Don't you try to tempt me, Jonathan Bamber," Caroline said, her voice already low and honey-like with desire. "No, no," she said, taking a deep breath and laughing as she gently pushed him away. "Just you behave yourself," she laughed, and he laughed too. Life really was coming back to them. "All right then, you go ahead. I'll close things up here," he said, kissing her once more before releasing her. Jonathan took a moment or two looking around the place before finally deciding to make his way out and close the door behind him. He wanted to savor the moment in which he'd felt so certain again of his future. It was important somehow, it meant something. However, once he'd locked the door and turned to go back into the house, he looked out onto the street beyond. There, staring straight at him from a distance of a couple of 100 yards, was a face he recognized. He was sure of it. When the man turned and hurried away, Jonathan hastened through the garden to the fence, staring after him. But the man turned down the side of a building and disappeared out of sight, and Jonathan knew he couldn't follow now. He had to go into the house. He had to sit down with his family to enjoy his evening meal. But Jonathan knew that the meal would turn to dust in his mouth, for he was certain, absolutely certain, that the man who had stared at him so intently was none other than Peter Logan. The following morning, Jonathan set off early for Grayling Plains. He felt guilty telling Caroline that it was a meeting which was already planned, one he had forgotten to tell her about. He'd said nothing of his sighting of Peter Logan. His wife and daughters were coming to terms with Blue Sky Falls, and he wasn't physically able to do or say anything which would upset their world. "Come in, Jonathan," David Lindstrom said, looking surprised. "Forgive me, did we have a meeting today? I thought it was the end of the week." "No, we didn't." "I'm sorry for busting in on you like this," Jonathan said, getting ready to explain, to give voice to his fears for the first time. "Then I'm assuming this is about Peter Logan. He's made contact with you?" David asked, surprising him entirely as he ushered him into a seat in the sitting room. "It is, but he hasn't made contact with me. I saw him last night standing outside my home. I don't know. I guess I've spent the whole night praying that I was mistaken. Clearly, I wasn't." Jonathan felt a sick, heavy feeling in his stomach. "Look, don't worry about it too much, my dear man. He came to me, told me his own version of things, and was certain that he would have some influence with me. But I told him that I already knew the details, that I was certain of my own opinion on the matter, and that he'd wasted 2,000 miles of hard journeying on nothing better than spite alone. Thank you, David. Thank you for believing in me. Your work speaks for itself, Jonathan, have no fear about that." He smiled and nodded, but Jonathan could see something in his eyes which he was certain was, at the very least, concern. "What? What is it?" "I won't lie to you, Jonathan, that man gave me a sense of, I don't know, doom," he said as if questioning himself. "He heard me, he understood me, but I had this feeling that it was still unfinished business. I mean, he's leaving today, he's going out on the late stagecoach, but still, I guess I had this feeling," he trailed off. Well, I suppose the good thing is that he is going. I guess that's what I need to hold on to, isn't it? Yes, I think so. He still looked a little vague. I hope so. Chapter 7. Claiming to be visiting a patient, Jonathan set off in the early evening to wait by the stagecoach. He knew one was leaving at 7 o'clock, and he was determined to find Peter Logan. There was only one way out of Blue Sky Falls, and he was certain that Logan would soon appear. Although Jonathan had been relieved that David Lindstrom had put Peter Logan in his place, he knew well that Peter was not a man who would be content to stay in his place. He was a vindictive man, and a man who had traveled 2,000 miles to indulge that spite would certainly not leave without his wants being fulfilled. Thinking of heading back to Boston, Bamber? Logan saw Jonathan before he saw him. What are you doing here, Logan? Jonathan heard the gruffness in his own voice, the aggression, and hardly recognized himself. He had had more than enough of this man to last him a lifetime. Just trying to make the doctor and Grayling Plains see sense. He looked smug, self-satisfied, and Jonathan felt sick to his stomach. What on earth had the man done now? I gather you weren't successful in your mission, given that Dr. Lindstrom already knew the details, the real details, of everything that went before in Boston. Ah, but there is more than one way to skin a cat, isn't there? Logan turned and clicked his fingers at the waiting stagecoach driver, pointing at his luggage and then at the wagon without a word. The man bowed his head a little and rushed to do Logan's bidding. Why did everybody capitulate to this spoiled, hateful man? And what exactly do you mean by that? Jonathan asked in a commanding voice. When Peter Logan simply smiled and turned away, making ready to get onto the stagecoach, Jonathan grabbed his arm roughly and turned him around. For a satisfying moment, he saw the fear in the eyes of the smaller, weaker man. Perhaps he was wondering if he had finally pushed the good doctor too far. I said, what exactly do you mean by that? Jonathan repeated, climbing on top of his own worst instincts and remembering the oath he had taken to do no harm. You'll find out soon enough, Logan said, shaking himself free and darting up into the stagecoach, still looking a little afraid. What did it matter now? What did it matter if Jonathan pulled the man from the coach and gave him a beating there and then? Whatever damage was done, he knew it, as he knew that it was only a matter now of waiting to discover exactly how it was Peter Logan had sought to ruin his life this time. Just 2 days later, Jonathan Bamber discovered exactly what Peter Logan had done to him this time. He was sitting in his consulting room waiting for a patient who was already half an hour late when Caroline came in, her face as white as a bedsheet, clutching the local newspaper. Did you know he was here? Did you know he had been here? She asked, looking shaken and about ready to faint. Jonathan didn't need to ask who she meant. Yes, I knew. It's on the front page, Jonathan. Here, she handed him the paper, and he could see how her hands shook. He held it out in front of him and hastily read over the first few lines. Newtown doctor chased out of Boston following the untimely death of a well-respected businessman, was the headline. It was enough, he didn't need to read anymore. Well, we have to hope that the good people of Blue Sky Falls won't listen to it, won't be swayed by it. I'm sorry, Caroline. I'm so sorry, he said and dropped down into his seat behind his desk and rested his head in his hands. Without even trying, he'd somehow managed to fail his family again. But when he felt his wife's hands on his shoulders, he knew that she would always stand by him. It was all for nothing in the end, wasn't it? Dragging the girls 2,000 miles away from home to live in a place that none of them can get used to. What was I thinking? Why did I expect that evil man would leave it at that? Will you ever be able to forgive me? He said, hearing his wife's gentle weeping and doing everything in his power to hold back his own. "There is nothing to forgive you for, Jonathan. You didn't do this, any of it, it was done to you. And as for the girls, they'll understand. They will know that you did everything in your power to keep them safe, to provide for them. Even leaving Boston, your home, the place you loved. They'll be upset, they'll be worried, but they will understand." Later that evening, he learned that his wife was right. All 5 of his girls, Janie included, rallied around him, and he knew that their mother had spoken to them at length first. She'd told them everything, and their only wild emotion was anger that anybody had treated their beloved father in such a way. Taking a glass of brandy out onto the porch as the sun began to set, Jonathan stared out across the dry countryside and wondered where would be home next. His wife and daughters might have told him that he'd never let them down once, but that wasn't what he felt in his heart. He was a husband and father. He was a protector, or at least he ought to have been. He looked down when he felt a light tapping on his calf to see that Scruffy had waddled out from the kitchen to join him. The pup wagged his tail, but slowly this time, uncertainly. "I'm sorry, Scruffy, old pal, but it looks like you've hitched your wagon to the wrong doctor," he said and drained his glass in one gulp. But Scruffy was determined and was on his hind legs, his front paws leaning on his master's leg, his eyes staring up at him. Jonathan leaned forward to scoop the pup into his arms, dropping him onto his lap. "Well, don't say I didn't warn you. Stay if you want, but I doubt it'll be an easy ride," he said, as the puppy curled up on his lap and promptly fell asleep. Chapter 8. It had been more than a week since the damning front-page newspaper article and, in all that time, Dr. Jonathan Bamber hadn't seen a single patient. By the 4th day, he had stopped bothering to open the consulting rooms. What was the point in sitting there all day waiting for people he knew would never come? The family was eating a late breakfast, all 5 girls around the table with him, nobody speaking. Caroline finished making coffee and set the pot down on the middle of the table before sitting down to join them. "We'll find a way, I promise," Caroline said, her eyes fixed to Jonathan's. "Even if we have to move again. Even if we have to go to Canada, I don't care. We're not going to let that hateful man win, do you hear me?" Her strength and determination were, as always, Jonathan's own savior. "That's right, honey, I'm not giving in. If Blue Sky Falls wants to believe it, let them. And wherever we go next, I sure won't be telling a single person from this place where we're headed. I've learned by my mistakes, believe me. Logan won't be able to find us again and, if he does, wherever it is, I can assure you that man won't leave town in one piece." "Daddy," Susie said, her mouth dangling open with surprise. "Sorry, honey. Daddy's just a little angry is all." "I didn't mean it," he said and reached out to ruffle her hair. "Well, if you don't do it, Daddy, I will," Janie said, her cheeks and eyes bright, her mouth set in angry determination. "He might have ruined this place for us, but he won't ruin the next." Despite the awfulness of this situation, Jonathan felt blessed to see that his daughter was recovering. She had forgiven him. She still loved him. At that moment, there came the sound of a bell ringing, and Jonathan quickly realized it was surely coming from the church. It was just a single bell, ring after ring after ring, without cease. He looked at his wife and she looked at him. It wasn't Sunday, but surely the bell ringing meant something. They both got up from the table and went out through the sitting room and into the street beyond. There were shouts coming from all over and the sounds of running feet. It seemed that everybody in town knew what that solo bell meant and were already acting upon it. "What is it? What's happening?" Jonathan called out to a man running past. With the bell ringing like that, it can only be a mine collapse, the man answered before darting away. Someone send for Dr. Lindstrom. We need him now. Jonathan heard another man shouting in the distance. Whether they like me or not, I have to go. I have to help them, Jonathan said, squeezing Caroline's hand before dashing for his consulting rooms. He quickly loaded a bag with all manner of things, dressings, iodine, ether, even scalpels, needles, and thread. He had no idea what he would need and decided to take a little of everything. I'm coming with you, Caroline said, beginning to fill another bag and brooking no argument. You'll need a nurse, you know you will. Then quickly run in and tell the girls, but keep them to the house. Jonathan was determined that the older girls should not follow their parents. In no time at all, Jonathan and Caroline had set off, each of them on horseback, riding out in the direction of the mine on the other side of town. When they arrived, it was to find a scene of absolute chaos. Soot-covered men wandered around, some of them injured, some of them simply shocked and dazed. Caroline immediately began to sort through them, separating the shocked from the truly wounded so that Jonathan might make a quick assessment of their injuries. Forgetting all that had gone on that week, Jonathan quickly tended to the worst of the injuries and directed Caroline to clean and dress the wounds of the less seriously injured. The chaos was beginning to calm just as Dr. Lindstrom arrived. Jonathan, what can I do? Dr. Lindstrom asked, striding towards him. I still have 3 here who need immediate attention. 2 who need stitches and 1 who needs a broken arm resetting. Right, I'll start with the stitches. The 3 of them continued to work efficiently, halted only by the appearance of another soot-covered man, his face drenched in sweat, his eyes wide and desperate. Are you hurt? Jonathan, who had just finished with his last patient, quickly got to his feet and reached out for the man. Come, you must sit. I'm not hurt, the man said and held his hands out in front of him as if to stop Jonathan speaking. I'm John Knowles, the mine supervisor. Listen, I did a head count, and one of my men is still down there. I crawled back along the main tunnel and he's trapped. The collapsed wall has him pinned by the arm. He's unconscious. I think I can free him, but it's going to take 2 of us. I can ask one of my men to go back in there, it's just he's injured. I don't want Sammy to die just because I don't know what I'm doing. He'll need a doctor, he finished breathlessly. Come on, lead the way. Jonathan was already moving, despite Caroline's anguished look. I'm not going to lie to you. The whole mine's unstable, John Knowles said, and Jonathan strangely appreciated the honesty. It felt pure after the underhand disappointments of the last days. Jonathan? Caroline said, hurrying over to him and looking up into his face. I can't leave him down there, honey, he said, steadying her, placing his hands on her shoulders. You know that, don't you? I know, she said, her eyes filling with tears. I will be just fine, I promise, he said and quickly kissed her before reaching down for his bag and hurrying after John Knowles. The trek down the tunnel towards the young man called Sammy was mercifully short, being just 200 or 300 yards away. Still, that was little comfort, for if the tunnel finally went, that 200 or 300 yards would be the longest distance of all. All right? John Knowles, clearly a brave man, was leading the way. He looked back over his shoulder, holding his lantern out towards the doctor and taking a good look at him. We can do this. I know, Jonathan said, hoping and praying that much was true. When they reached the young man called Sammy, it was clear that he had lost a good deal of blood. His face was a horrible waxy gray in the gloom of the lantern, and Jonathan could see the dark stain of blood soaking through his dirty shirt and knew that it had undoubtedly pooled on the ground beneath him. "If I can lever up this rock here, I think you can pull him out, Doctor. What do you think? Would he survive it?" "You have to do it, Mr. Knowles. The only other way to free him is amputation and, for a young man like that, I'm sure amputation is as good as a life coming to an end. But I need to stop the blood first. The rock is holding the wound closed. If we lift it, he could bleed out before I can stop it," Jonathan said. "This tunnel won't hold for long, document. Maybe we should get him out and stitch him up then." "He won't make it." There was a groan above them as the rock shifted, and dust sprinkled all around them. "You move back, I will call you when I'm ready," Jonathan said. "I'll stay here, get ready, we will be quicker that way." John Knowles crouched by his side, ready to help in any way he could. Jonathan stitched up the wound and then got his belt ready to apply a tourniquet, but it took a painfully long time. He knew that Caroline would be out there on her own with her heart in her mouth as she waited for him. Above them the roof continued to groan and shower them in dust but pushed everything away and just concentrated on the job at hand. When the time finally came, Jonathan had never been more afraid. John Knowles wriggled an iron bar beneath the rock, which so effectively pinned poor young Sammy to the ground. With a gargantuan effort, an effort which was accompanied by much moaning and grunting, the rock shifted. In the quiet of the tunnel, that simple movement created a dreadful noise, and Jonathan began to truly fear that the walls would collapse in on them. Now, John Knowles said, and Jonathan gripped the young man as hard as he could and pulled him away, freeing him. He held his breath as Knowles carefully, painstakingly, lowered the rock down into its former position. The two of them seemed trapped in stasis for some moments afterward, as if waiting for inevitable disaster. When it didn't come, Jonathan breathed a sigh of relief. The wound held, and he quickly fastened his belt tightly around the man's leg to make sure moving him wouldn't rip the stitches and let him bleed out while they carried him. They were ready but still had to get out of the tunnel. At least they had managed thus far. It took almost 10 more minutes to carefully carry the young man out between them, and when they appeared at the mouth of the coal mine, there came a great and unexpected cheer. It was so unexpected that Jonathan almost let go of young Sammy. A host of miners darted up to them, quickly relieving the two exhausted rescuers of the young man they had saved. David Lindstrom was there on the spot, ready to treat the man, ready to take over from his colleague. Jonathan was greatly relieved. He didn't think he had the wherewithal left in him to give the young man the medical attention he needed. "Oh, thank God. Thank God," Caroline said, rushing into his arms the very moment Sammy was taken from him. "You seemed to be in there for so long. I've never been so scared in my life." She was laughing and crying all once, clinging to him, shaking from head to foot. "Let Peter Logan do his worst, my love. As long as I have you, as long as I have the girls, I have everything in this world I need." Now she began to sob, her fear and relief spilling out of her, wave after wave. Chapter 9. The following morning when Jonathan Bamber awoke, he ached from head to foot. He had pulled just about every muscle in his body, helping Knowles to rescue young Sammy. Even after the rescue, he had worked for many hours tending to the rest of the injuries. He wished, not for the first time, that he was a much younger man. He turned to his side, ready to reach for his wife. However, he quickly realized that she wasn't there at all and he was left blinking in the bright sunshine. The drapes were already open and, as he lay there listening, he could hear the chatter of his wife and daughters far beyond in the kitchen. He searched for his pocket watch on the bedside table and blinked until the tiny hands came into focus. It was already 9:30, he'd overslept by 2 hours. He washed and dressed slowly, his aching shoulders and arms slowing him down somewhat. He looked at his face in the small oval mirror that his wife kept on the dresser and winced as he ran his hand over a stubbly chin. Well, he could shave tomorrow. Today he ached, today, he wanted to rest and nothing more. When he finally wandered into the kitchen, it was to find his entire family around the table chattering excitedly. They had the newspaper in the center of the table, taking it in turns to pull it towards them and have a read. "What's so exciting?" Jonathan asked and then let out a great bear-like yawn. "Forgive me, you wouldn't think I slept like a log all night, would you?" He chuckled. "Daddy, you have to read it. You have to see it," Janie said, genuine excitement in her eyes for the first time in a long time. She pushed the paper towards him as he took his place at the kitchen table and looked beseechingly at his wife in hopes of a cup of coffee. "Here," Caroline said, reading his mind as always. She filled a cup from the pot and pushed it towards him. "Thank you, honey," he said and took a deep gulp of the hot coffee before focusing his attention on the newspaper in front of him. "Newtown doctor is local hero," screamed the larger-than-life headline. He went on to read a little more. Dr. Jonathan Bamber, the long-awaited doctor of Blue Sky Falls, has already proved to be worth his weight in gold. Following the collapse of one of the tunnels inside the Blue Sky mine yesterday, the brave doctor, formerly of Boston, ventured into the unstable tunnel to rescue Samuel Bryant, 18, from within. Mr. John Knowles, the supervisor at the Blue Sky mine, told this reporter that, had it not been for the bravery of the doctor and his treatment of the young man at the scene, Samuel Bryant would most certainly have died. Jonathan set the newspaper down on the kitchen table, lifted his coffee cup again, and leaned back in his chair. He began to chuckle, shaking his head from side to side. "They might not be hailing me such a brave hero if they'd seen me quaking in that tunnel when we finally pulled the young man free, that's for sure," he said and continued to laugh. "But that's the whole point, Daddy, isn't it? Bravery is being afraid of something and doing it anyway," Janie said, tears filling her pretty blue eyes so like her mother's. "Well, thank you, Janie. That sure is kind of you." He rose from his seat just enough to lean over and kiss his daughter's cheek. "I guess it looks as if I ought to prepare a breakfast fit for a hero, doesn't it?" Caroline said, and she seemed so bright and happy. Happy that he was alive, Jonathan had no doubt of that. But perhaps happy that he had been recognized for his service to Blue Sky Falls. Perhaps it would mean a change in their circumstances, at least he could hope so if nothing else. After a leisurely breakfast, Jonathan decided to go out to his consulting rooms and make sure that everything was in order. He didn't give voice to it, but he was hoping and praying that there might be some upturn in their fortunes now. Perhaps one or two of the locals would return to him, and, in time, perhaps a few more would wander his way. It might be a slow start, but perhaps it really was a start after all. However, the moment he set foot out of the house, his mouth fell open. There, gathered around the front of the single-story consulting rooms, were a good dozen or so people. They seemed to be waiting patiently, smiling at him shyly as he surveyed them. "Good morning," he said, hoping that it was still morning. "Is everybody all right? Is there anything I can do?" he asked, hardly daring to dream that he could trust his own eyes. "Reckon we did you a wrong, Dr. Bamber," a man of his own age said, being the first to break free of the crowd to stride across the lawn and shake Jonathan by the hand. "But there's one or two of us who wouldn't mind a few minutes of your time today, if you have them. My back's been paining me for weeks and I reckon it's about time I took some advice." The man smiled at him broadly, letting him know in just a few words that the people gathered around his consulting rooms were all his patients once again. Of course. Let's get the office opened up and see if we can find enough seats for you all. Now then, just give me a moment, and I'll call Mrs. Bamber, he said and quickly hurried back into the house. His wife, however, was already by the door, her eyes bright and her smile wide. I saw them through the window, Jonathan. Are they back? Are they all back? They're all back, and more besides. Well, what do you say? Are you up to a full day's work? You bet I am, honey. You bet I am. Epilogue. I think we'll need to get Janie trained up to help us, Jonathan. The house is going to ruin with me spending every day with you in here, Caroline said, sneaking up behind her husband and sliding her arms around his waist. Tired of me already, huh? Well, I suppose it has been more than 20 years. He laughed and turned, taking her into his arms. It's not that. You know I'd never be tired of you. But it's been 3 months, and we have more patients than we know what to do with. If we get Janie trained, at least she can deal with some of the dressings and simple nursing issues and free me to get back into my home once in a great while. Your wish is my command. I'll speak to Janie tonight. Thank you, honey. She reached up to kiss him, far more passionately than he had been expecting. Oh, now that's nice, he said, throwing himself into the moment. Perhaps I should close the blinds? Sorry, honey, but the girls will have almost gotten the meal ready. You'll have to wait. She gave him a teasing grin. You're a wicked woman, Caroline Bamber. I know, but you still love me, don't you? I still love you. I'll love you forever, you know that, he said, and he knew he did. This was a new start to their life and to their love. And I'll love you forever, Jonathan. She took his hand. I never imagined I'd be this happy again. But it's all working out, isn't it? We're going from strength to strength. We sure are. Now come on, he said, kissing her cheek. Our girls will be waiting. Thank you for listening to Scruffy, the Dog of Blue Sky Falls, prequel, A New Start to Love. Now, I'm excited to share with you the first book in the series, A Love Lighter Than Air. Copyright Indiana Wake. A Love Lighter Than Air by Indiana Wake. Chapter 1. So, Janie will sort out the medication for you. Just remember, 1 pill twice a day with food, Dr. Jonathan Bamber said as he came out of his consulting room with his patient and handed a small piece of paper to his nurse. I will, Dr. Bamber, Mrs. Mellor said gratefully as she bid the doctor farewell and approached the desk in the outer office where Janie was already preparing the small paper packet of tablets. As the doctor says, twice a day with food, Janie Bamber said in such a polite manner, it was almost rude. She knew she was being aloof and standoffish, but she just couldn't rein it in. Thank you, Miss Bamber, Mrs. Mellor said a little tartly. The newcomer's tone certainly hadn't been lost on her. And we'll see you next week, Mrs. Mellor, just to be sure it's all going well. Dr. Bamber reappeared, just when his daughter, Janie, thought him safely tucked away back in his consulting room. Sure will, Doctor. Mrs. Mellor's face lost its annoyed edge as the doctor showed her to the door personally. He watched her walking away before closing the door and turning to Janie with a look she was already dreading, disappointment. Janie, was that absolutely necessary? He asked with an exaggerated sigh. Mrs. Mellor is a nice woman, and she came here for my help. He crossed the room and sat on the edge of Janie's desk. Nice now, sure, Janie said a little petulantly. But where was Mrs. Mellor and her illness when this backward little town turned its back on you, Daddy? It's time to get over this, honey. It's been 8 months since then, and it was only a week or so, wasn't it? They soon came around. Yes, sure they did, just as soon as you risked your life rescuing one of their own from a collapsed mine tunnel. Before that, they were oh so ready to believe the lies Peter Logan came and told them. I'm not so ready to forgive and forget as you are. Janie's mouth was set in a serious line as she sat down behind her desk and made a pretense of sorting through the patient files, which needed to be packed away again. The town of Blue Sky Falls irritated her in every way. The Colorado town was always covered in dust and so small that, as far as Janie was concerned, its inhabitants all thought with the same little brain cell. It was certainly a far cry from Boston, where her family had moved from just months before. Janie's stomach turned a little at the thought of it. They hadn't moved as much as they'd run away. She didn't blame her father, of course, because none of it was his fault. A wealthy, spiteful man had ruined the reputation of Dr. Jonathan Bamber for the crime of tending to his dying father with care and dignity. Death had been inevitable, but the fact that the old man died had been enough for Peter Logan, his son, to follow them all the way out to Colorado and let the whole town know his twisted version of events. It had been heartbreaking after they had fled their home for a new life. Then, they saw that life go up in the flames of grief and spite. The townsfolk sure had turned their backs on them. For a while, they thought they would have to move again. It was so unfair. Her father was a good doctor, caring and kind and good at his job. But the town had been against them right up until the moment her beloved father disappeared into the coal mine to save a stranger. Well, Janie for one, would never forgive them. I don't have a choice but to forgive, honey. This is how I make my living, after all, he began. He looked at her with kindly eyes, and Janie felt bad. She didn't want to give him a hard time. He'd suffered enough in the last few years. And if the whole incident with Peter Logan proved anything to me, it's this: we rely on their good opinion of us. If we lose that good opinion, then we're wasting our time being here. Doesn't that worry you? No, not especially. Look, Janie, folks are folks wherever you go. They read something in the local newspaper about the brand new town doctor connected with the death of a man in Boston, and they panic. They go elsewhere. I was just fortunate to have a chance to prove myself when I saved that young man's life. He sighed. Janie, they hadn't had a chance to get to know me before Peter Logan came here to do his worst. But they know me now, don't they? They know I'm a good doctor, and all the rest is in the past for them. But you didn't kill Jedediah Logan, Daddy, he just died. He was old and sick, and he died. Yes, and the town of Blue Sky Falls knows that now. They didn't know the truth of it back then. All they had to go on was what was printed on the front page of a newspaper they'd been trusting all their lives. The same newspaper that declared you a hero when you saved Sammy Bryant from the coal mine, she said, her anger barely concealed. Why did people have to be so gullible? So credulous? That's the nature of newspapers, honey. They print what they have and move on. I'm not sure I can move on so fast. I know, but I don't think it's entirely the fault of the town, is it? I mean, you're still getting over Dale Corby. I don't blame you for being angry with me for moving you so far away from him. He looked down at the files she was shuffling. Janie kept her face neutral. She had believed she would marry Dale, but when their fortunes turned, so did he. Or, at least that was what everyone told her. Janie still believed there was a reason for what happened. Dale must have just been busy, but she wouldn't say that, not anymore. I'm not angry with you, Daddy. You did what you had to do to survive, I know that. And anyway, I hardly think about Dale anymore. Janie looked down too. She didn't want her father to see the lie right there in her eyes. We have to be a part of Blue Sky Falls, honey. We're right in the middle of things, after all. It's places like ours which form the heart of any community. Everybody needs a doctor once in a while, don't they? And I'd be much happier if they came to me than went out of town to find someone else. He raised his eyebrows at her. He was asking her to trust him, to work with him. All right, Daddy. I'll try, Janie said, and wondered if that was really the truth. Chapter 2. I'm looking forward to the barn dance, Janie. I can't believe this is the first one we're going to when we've been here for so long already. Marie bounced up and down on her heels. The grin on her face could not get any wider. We've only been here for 8 months, Janie said, as if defending something. 8 months, sure. But there's a barn dance every Saturday night. That's at least 32 we've missed, isn't it? Marie grinned and looked down at her dress. Does this look all right? I don't even know what you're supposed to wear to a barn dance. At 17, Marie was just 3 years younger than Janie and the closest person to her in the whole world. She was always excited about everything and seemed to have fit into Blue Sky Falls far easier than Janie had. Sometimes Janie wished she could be as accepting and optimistic as her younger sister, but her own stubbornness would never allow for such a thing. Despite their differences, the sisters loved each other deeply and were the very best of friends. When they'd left Boston behind, and with it, Dale Corby, Marie had been the only person who was able to keep Janie going. She'd never forget her sister's kindness and care when she'd needed it most. You're asking the wrong person, Janie said with a laugh. When did I ever go to a barn dance in Boston? I don't think there were any, Marie said and looked thoughtful. That's my point, honey. Janie was still laughing but mirthlessly. Janie, I know this isn't Boston. It's never going to be Boston, but it doesn't mean it's not a good place. I like it here. I know you don't, but I think it has more to do with fighting it than anything else. Stop fighting it, and maybe you'll see the good every so often. Like the countryside, for instance. We never had such fine views across the plains and over to the mountains before, now did we? I'm not sure I care too much about the view, Janie said sadly and sat down on the bed where Scruffy, the brown floppy-haired dog, lay sleeping. Mama said he wasn't supposed to get on the beds, she went on, changing the subject as she stroked the dog's furry belly. That was one of her conditions when the younger ones found him, wasn't it? It was, but I don't think Mama ever believed everything would be so perfect, right down to the behavior of the stray pup we found. It was clear from Marie's voice that she was losing patience with her sister, and Janie couldn't really blame her. She'd been determined to hate Blue Sky Falls even before they'd left Boston, and she had no doubt that Marie and the rest of the family were getting tired of it. I'm sorry, Janie said and felt her eyes stinging with tears. I wish I could be so happy about it all like the rest of you, but I can't. I miss him every day, and I know if we'd stayed in Boston, we could have worked it out. We'd have gotten back together, I know we would. I know you're still hurting, and I'm sorry for upsetting you. But if you don't let go and move on, how are you ever going to be happy again? I suppose Dale will have moved on already. He's probably already courting Janet Myers, and I will just be a distant memory. Then it's time to make Dale Corby a distant memory too, isn't it? Marie looked at her cautiously. It was the first time Marie hadn't indulged her, the first time she hadn't said that Dale would be beside himself with grief and unable to look at another woman. It made Janie's heart sink. But maybe he's feeling just the same as me, Janie said defiantly. Then he should have married you before our family left Boston. It wasn't as if you didn't tell him, was it? He had the chance to put things right between you and marry you. He could have given you a home, then you'd be mourning the loss of the family who had to leave without you. I suppose it's an impossible one to win. Unless, of course, you decide to let go of the past and embrace the future. You're tired of me, and I don't blame you. Janie sniffed loudly. I'll never be tired of you, Janie. Never. Marie sounded scandalized. I'm tired of watching you hurting yourself is all. I'm tired of the way you're so determined to make your own life a misery far beyond anything that happened between you and Dale. I guess I'm just exasperated, honey. I love you so much, and it hurts me to watch you retreating from life. I know it's not Boston, but did you ever think that it might be more fun here? There's none of the stress of being permanently on display in some fine dining room or other when Daddy had to please everyone just to keep clients. I, for one, don't miss that. Remember Mrs. Higginbottom? Marie said with a humorous wince. I do think young ladies ought not to read. It gives them ideas. Janie said in a perfect imitation of the worst of their father's society patients in Boston. Oh, I sure am glad we don't have to humor that old crow anymore. Janie laughed, and Marie joined her. It felt good to laugh, to remember the things the two sisters had once found so amusing. Janie knew, deep down, that she would much rather give in to all of this and feel better, she just didn't know how. Maybe the barn dance would be a good start, or maybe it would be just one more thing to make her loathe Blue Sky Falls. Only time would tell. So, are you ready? Marie asked, reaching for her sister's hand. Yes, I'm ready. Chapter 3. As they walked into the lively and very full town barn, Janie breathed a sigh of relief that she wasn't too overdone. She'd chosen a very simple dress in a rich deep blue and had put 2 pristine white petticoats beneath it. She looked nice without looking too out of place, and she was comfortable with that, at least. But all the talk of Dale before they'd set off had turned her a little inside out, and she realized that she would be unlikely to enjoy the barn dance whatever she was wearing. You look so lovely, Janie, Marie said as if reading her mind. And I'd forgotten how long your hair is, how beautiful and wavy. You should wear it down more often, Marie continued, smiling. Janie had pinned her glossy chestnut hair up at the front and left it hanging in soft waves over her shoulders and midway down her back. It really was her crowning glory, and she was grateful to have inherited her mother's hair. It's very busy, isn't it? Janie said a little tremulously. I hadn't expected it to be quite so wild. It's hardly wild. Just think of it as a little exuberant if that helps. Marie's wide smile was enough for Janie to see her excitement. Marie had done so much for Janie that she most certainly wouldn't do anything to spoil the night she'd looked forward to for so long. Oh, yes, exuberant. Janie laughed in spite of herself. Oh, look, there are Lucy and Karen. Can we join them? They're looking over, Marie said excitedly. Of course. Janie didn't know the young women, but she had heard of them. Unlike Janie, Marie had easily made friends in town. Janie felt suddenly very left behind. I'm so glad you could come tonight, Marie. Lucy said and embraced Marie. Me too. Karen added and joined in the embrace. Janie simply stood there feeling like an intruder of some kind, an unwanted interloper. This is my big sister, Janie. Marie said, and the women turned to greet her enthusiastically. Janie felt relieved to be so easily accepted and stood with the little group listening to their chatter and laughter. She smiled and nodded and wished the night was over. I guess you're not the chatterbox your little sister is, huh? The voice came from behind her and Janie spun around to see a man smiling at her. He was tall and had very dark hair and very bright blue eyes. He had a confident smile on his handsome face and touched the broad brim of his hat in greeting. "I'm Matt Brooks," he added and thrust out a hand. "Janie Bamber," she said, shaking his hand and smiling against her better judgment. He'd appeared so suddenly that she hadn't had time to prepare a simple but polite rejection of him, and it made her feel a little wrong-footed. "How are you finding Blue Sky Falls?" "Not a patch on Boston, I reckon," he went on, still smiling at her. He was a handsome man who was a few years older than she was, at maybe 25 or 6. He wore a plaid shirt, as did every man in the whole barn, but it was neat and clean, and the blues suited him. His trousers were thick and plain and similarly in good condition. There was just something a little forward in his manner that Janie didn't immediately take to. "No, it isn't," she said and wished she hadn't. She knew just how elite and snobbish that sounded, and, as much as she wanted to be back home again, she didn't really think Blue Sky Falls beneath her. His face changed, his eyes widening and his eyebrows raising. She'd gone too far, and she knew it. The problem was, any apology she might give would sound hollow. "Forgive me, Mr. Brooks, it's just that I never wanted to leave Boston. It was my home, and I miss it every day. I didn't mean to be rude." "Never mind." His smile returned. "I'm sorry you're not settling in. Well, I'm guessing you won't be wanting to dance with one of the locals, so I'll leave you to not enjoy your evening in peace." He was smiling at her and seemed more amused now than affronted. Was he mocking her? "Nice to meet you, Miss Bamber," he added, touching the brim of his hat again before turning to leave her. "Oh, who was that?" Marie asked, sidling up to her sister once she was alone again. "Now, that right there is a handsome man. He's Matt Brooks, apparently." "And what does he do?" "I don't know." "You didn't ask him?" Marie studied her with some confusion. "He didn't stay that long. I guess I was kind of rude to him." Janie really wanted to go home now. She hardly knew how she felt anymore. "Why? Was he rude to you first?" "No, he wasn't." "Oh, Janie." Marie sounded exasperated again. "Look, if you want to go home, we'll go." "No, I don't." "I'm sorry, I suppose this is just going to take some getting used to. Anyway, I think your friends want to dance." Janie tried to smile. "I'll be fine right here. Look, there's even a bale of hay for me to sit on." She sat down and gave a great pretense of trying to fit in. "All right. Well, I'm going to dance then," Marie said, and Janie nodded. "You enjoy yourself, honey," Janie added with genuine warmth. She had silently promised not to spoil her sister's evening, and she would see it through. Janie sat alone for some time watching her sister and her two friends having a wonderful evening. More than once, she peered across the barn at Matt Brooks as he stood with a group of young men talking and laughing. He didn't look back, he just went about his evening as if the two of them had never spoken. Well, she sure couldn't blame him for that. What was unsettling, however, was the fact that she was relieved that he didn't dance with anyone else. But why should she care about that? Chapter 4. Matt felt ill again. His head was pounding, and his arms and legs felt heavy and sluggish. It was a common feeling. Only now, his stomach began to give him twinges of discomfort, and he reckoned the time had come to make his way to town and consult with the new doctor. Of course, bumping into the doctor's frosty assistant added a little extra incentive, if he was honest. There was something about Janie Bamber, something he could see even though they'd only met once. Sure, He'd felt a flash of annoyance when she'd been so determined to let him know what she thought of Blue Sky Falls. However, there had been something in her apology, which seemed real, and he sure could believe the idea that she missed home more than she hated her new one. Ever since he'd walked away from her, Matt had regretted it. He was a confident young man, a harmless sort of smooth talker, and he wouldn't ordinarily be so easily dissuaded. And when he'd noted that she had watched him a little now and again from her perch on the hay bale, he'd wondered if the conversation between them might have warmed up a little if he'd stayed. When he finally arrived in the little building attached to the doctor's house, Matt was disappointed to find that only Dr. Bamber was inside. He'd hoped to see Janie again. He'd heard that she was the doctor's assistant and nurse, as well as his daughter. "Good morning, what can I do for you?" the doctor asked, looking up from the desk he was leaning over in the waiting area. "Good morning, Doc. I was wondering if I could make an appointment with you. I've got a few aches and pains and something of a woodpecker going off in the middle of my head." Matt smiled, feeling immediately at ease. Dr. Bamber was certainly a heck of a lot warmer than his daughter, that was for sure. "I'm free now if you are," Dr. Bamber said with a smile. "What's your name?" "Matthew Brooks." "Right, let me see if I can find the last doctor's file in your name." He winced as he opened a drawer in a metal cabinet and began to rifle through it. "Ah, found it immediately. Now that doesn't happen very often," he went on and chuckled. "Right, let's see what we can do for you, shall we?" he said and held out an arm in the direction of his consulting room. In the end, Matt was glad that he had chosen to consult the doctor. He certainly didn't have any answers yet, but he had the feeling that this particular doctor would be much more intent on at least looking for an answer than the last doctor had been. He'd suffered from these symptoms for so long to varying degrees that he was beginning to think he would have to suffer them for the rest of his life. "I certainly have the pain relief for your headaches here today, but I think I'm going to have to send off for the muscle rub. Now, I know this isn't a cure for your symptoms, just something to take the edge off them while we begin the search for the cause, if that makes sense." Dr. Bamber looked at him for signs of understanding. "Yes, that makes sense. It sure would be nice to have something to dull the headache, believe me." The doctor was already rising to his feet, having scribbled the required medication on a small piece of paper. He reached the door before Matt did and opened it for him. As soon as Matt walked through it, he could see that Janie Bamber had returned from wherever it was she had been. She looked up from her desk when she saw him standing not feet from it and quite clearly didn't see her father there, for she looked at him with something of a scowl before saying, "What are you doing here?" "Janie," her father said in a voice that managed to sound both annoyed and disappointed. "I was just visiting the doctor, Miss Bamber," Matt said with some amusement, childishly pleased that the young woman was on the wrong side of her father and likely to suffer a little on account of it when he was gone. "If that's all right with you, of course," he went on, grinning at her and enjoying himself at her expense. "Oh, yes, of course," she said and closed her eyes, screwing up her face a little in embarrassment and regret. "Is that for me, doctor?" She rose to her feet and held out her hand for the small piece of paper that her father carried. "I'll make them up immediately," she went on, talking fast and trying to paper over the cracks of her poor manners. "We only have the pain relief medication, Janie. Can you please write off to the suppliers today for the muscle rub?" The doctor seemed equally relieved to have some deflection from his daughter's outburst. "Yes, certainly," Janie said and immediately set about weighing out some of the pain-killing powders and tipping them into a small paper packet. "Has the doctor already told you how much to take?" she asked, finally looking into Matt's face, her own cheeks blazing red. "Yes, thank you," Matt said and reached out to take the packet from her, enjoying the feel of her hand against his. "I'm going to contact the laboratory in Denver," Mr. Brooks, and find out how many of the tests I will be looking for can be executed there. As soon as I have that information, I'll take a sample of your blood, and we'll get on with it. But if your symptoms worsen in the meantime, please do come back to me. Oh, yes, and as soon as the muscle rub arrives, Janie will bring it out to the farm for you. The doctor added the last with a hint of mischief in his eyes. His daughter's embarrassment wasn't going to be over any time soon. Thank you, doctor. Matt reached for the doctor's hand and shook it firmly. Above all, he was truly grateful for at least the vaguest prospect of somebody finally getting to the bottom of the symptoms, which were not exactly severe but debilitating and wearing nonetheless. You're welcome. The doctor nodded and returned to his consulting room, leaving Matt and Janie alone for a moment. Well, it was nice to see you again, Miss Hoity-Toity, Matt said with a laugh before turning to make his way out of the doctor's office. As he walked away, he chuckled to himself. She was certainly a scratchy one, no doubt about it. But there was always some regret mixed in, and he had a sudden desire to find out what that was all about. With a broad grin on his face, Matt realized that he was already looking forward to the delivery of the muscle rub for more reasons than one. Chapter 5. Daddy, do I really have to deliver the muscle rub? Can't Marie do it? I'm sure she won't mind, Janie asked beseechingly. Oh, I'm sure Marie won't mind either, but I do. I told that young man to expect you to deliver it, and deliver it you will. I don't mean to be harsh or unfair, honey, but you were just plain rude to him, and you could have cost me a client if he wasn't so understanding. Her father still looked so disappointed, and Janie could feel tears in her eyes. I don't know why I said it, Daddy, I just want you to know that I didn't really mean it. He'd talked to me at the barn dance, and I thought he'd just come in to speak to me again. I didn't realize he had an appointment with you. Her tears began to fall. I know, you've already explained. I do understand, Janie, but I'm afraid you still need to make amends. It doesn't give me any joy to make things awkward for you when you've already been through so much. I know you're still feeling low, honey, but this is home now and there isn't anything I can do to change it. You know we can't go back to Boston, there's nothing for us there. That doesn't include me, Daddy. I left something behind. I know you did, and I'm sorry for it. I can't change it, and I wish I could. But we live here now in Blue Sky Falls, and we all have to do what we can to fit in. That means being nice to our patients. Just give me the medication, Janie said with some annoyance. If I have to go, then I want to go now and get it over with. She held out her hand. And you'll be polite? Yes, I'll be polite. The Brooks Dairy Farm was an impressive place. The land was vast grazing pastures, cows feasting on the lush green grass in field after field for as far as the eye could see. The farmhouse was large too, a wooden building on 2 levels painted in a clean and brilliant white. The farm buildings beyond the large yard and gardens were neat and cared for. Janie wondered just how many cows the family had. She jumped down from her horse and tethered him to the sturdy wooden fencing before pulling the glass jar of muscle rub from her pocket. Holding it in one hand, she reluctantly made her way to the door of the farmhouse. Presumably, Matt himself would be out on the farm working, and the idea gave her at least some small comfort. She could certainly do without seeing him today, regardless of her father's wishes. Nonetheless, if Matt Brooks had mentioned her rudeness to his mother, she might be in for an even worse time of it now. Good morning. A pleasant lady with rosy cheeks and a broad smile answered the door. She was undoubtedly Matt's mother, for her hair was as dark, barring a few white strands, and her eyes were as blue. Mrs. Brooks? Janie asked shyly. I'm Janie Bamber. My father asked me to bring your son's medication. Well, actually, it's a muscle rub rather than medication, she added, feeling flustered. Oh, yes, of course. Matt did say you'd be coming. Come on in, she said brightly, and Janie breathed a quiet sigh of relief not to have had a strip torn off her there and then. And how are his symptoms? Is he still suffering the headaches? Janie knew she must make some conversation. She was being invited into their home, and it was time to be the woman she used to be. The woman who had been raised to have nice manners. The powder your father gave him has taken the edge off things, I think, but I'm still so worried about him, Mrs. Brooks said and ushered Janie into a seat at the kitchen table. He's had these problems for so long, and he always smiles, always tries to deny how much it gets him down. Still, that's boys for you. Or men, should say. He's 26 now, even if I still think of him as my little boy. A mother's concern for her son was enough to bring a lump to Janie's throat. She felt truly shabby at that moment and wished she could take back every stitch of conversation she'd had with Matt Brooks. They'd only passed a few words between them, and almost all of her own had been unnecessarily sour. I'll just call him, Mrs. Brooks went on. Oh, there's no need to interfere with his work, Mrs. Brooks, really. Janie felt a little sense of panic. He's not working today. His daddy sent him back down again when his stomach started paining him. He's upstairs, I'll just call him, she went on and disappeared from the homely and large kitchen. The farmhouse was a good deal bigger than the home she and her family shared, and she thought it a very nice home indeed. She could see a nice-looking sitting room through the open door from the kitchen and found herself a little mesmerized by the way the bright sunlight fell across the deep blue rug on the wooden floor. Miss Bamber, Matt's voice startled her. Thanks for coming, I reckon I could use that rub today. He smiled at her, with no hint of annoyance after their last meeting. My daddy says, she paused and cleared her throat. Dr. Bamber says to use it as and when you need it. There's no limit to how often you use it, I guess. She could feel her cheeks reddening. I'll boil some water for tea, Mrs. Brooks said as she came back into the kitchen. Oh, please don't go to any trouble for me, Janie began to politely object. It's no trouble, Mama, is it? Matt said and seemed suddenly amused by her disquiet. Why don't we go on into the sitting room, Miss Bamber? His eyes seemed to issue a challenge. Yes, of course, she said and rose to her feet. Thank you, Mrs. Brooks, she added, and the woman smiled at her. The sitting room really was nice, and she settled down on one of two large couches. Matt sat in a chair opposite her, smiling in that confident and vaguely annoying way of his. So, you can use the muscle rub as and when you need it. Janie knew she was repeating herself but didn't know what else to say. So you've said, he chuckled, and she felt her annoyance rise. I realize you have the upper hand here, Mr. Brooks, but I shall apologize again for my behavior, nonetheless. I really am sorry for being so rude, but I don't want to spend the next 20 minutes being at the mercy of your tendency to ridicule, Janie said firmly, despite her blushes. I'm not a ridiculing kind of man, he said, grinning. Oh, really? Then you address everybody as Miss Hoity-Toity, do you? She snapped in a low voice, not wanting his mother to hear them arguing. All right, he said, holding up his hands in mock surrender. Don't shoot, he was still clearly amused. And you're right, I shouldn't have said that either. I'm sorry. So, now we have all the apologies out of the way, how about we start again, huh? Yes, all right, Janie said, knowing there was nothing for it but to accept his apology. Your mama said your symptoms aren't improving. Well, the edge is off the headaches, but I can still feel it. And it is bad? No, it's never that bad. That's the problem. None of the symptoms are anything you'd give much thought to if they weren't there constantly. It's not searing pain, but it's starting to make me feel trapped. At that moment, she could see his exhaustion. He really was being ground down by chronic pain. Even if it wasn't the sort of pain that doubled a man over, she could understand how its constant presence might easily ruin a life. But I'll survive it, I reckon, he added with the sort of gusto that struck her as a brave face rather than a fact. I'll let my father know, she said, realizing it was ridiculous to keep referring to him as Dr. Bamber. He's still waiting for news from the laboratory in Denver. I can wait, really. Like I said, it's not so bad. That's what he always says, Mrs. Brooks said, setting down their tray of tea before disappearing as suddenly as she had arrived. How long has this been going on? Janie felt for him suddenly, seeing past his confident manner and her own annoyance. A few years, I guess. And it's getting worse? It seems to be. He closed his eyes for a moment. Anyway, I have a question of my own now. He was forcefully bright. Oh. Are you going to the barn dance on Saturday night? Probably not, Janie said truthfully. I reckon I could have answered my own question without asking it, don't you? Once again, the mocking antagonism was back, and Janie bit her tongue. She would just have to be as polite as possible and wait for her time to leave, just as her daddy had asked of her. Chapter 6. Are you sure you want to be here tonight? Marie asked as the sisters walked arm in arm into the town barn on Saturday night. Lucy and Karen will be here, and I'll find them soon enough. I do want to be here. I want to give it another try, Janie said, and wondered if that was the absolute truth. Maybe she wanted to just prove to Matt Brooks that she wasn't such a sour person after all. And that was the truth, Janie wasn't really sour. I know you only came the last time because of me, to support me, and I know you didn't enjoy it, honey. What I'm saying is you don't have to keep trying. I know everybody's on at you to become a part of the town, to join in, and I reckon I was at the top of that list. If you're not ready, you're just not ready, and that's all there is to it. I'm sure not going to bully you or manipulate you, Janie. And if you want to turn around right now and go home, you won't hear any grumbling from me. Marie had stopped her sister just a few feet from the barn entrance, holding her arms still but turning to look at her. You've got to do what's right for you, that's what I'm saying. I want to stay, Marie. I don't suppose for a minute that I'll be the life and soul of the party, that I'll be in the middle of all the dancers with a big smile on my face, but I still want to stay. Even if I just sit on a bale of hay and watch everybody else, that's what I want to do. Even as they walked into the barn, Janie was already looking for him. If Matt had asked her if she was going to the barn dance, surely that meant that he would be here. She didn't really know what she'd say to him if she did see him, assuming she did manage to summon up the courage to speak to him. In the end, she just decided to let that happen naturally rather than trying to plan it. After some moments of looking around the barn, Janie finally set eyes on him. He wasn't in the middle of a group of men this time, chattering and laughing, but rather he was sitting on a hay bale on his own towards the back of the barn. His head was bowed a little as if he was studying some extraordinarily interesting speck on the floor, and his demeanor gave her a very low feeling. Something was wrong, she was sure of it, and now she knew she really would have to summon up the courage to go to him instead of waiting for him to come to her. Oh, look, there's Lucy and Karen and the other girls. Come on, let's go, Marie said brightly. Do you mind if I join you in a minute? There's somebody I need to speak to, Janie said, hardly able to take her eyes off Matt. Of course, Marie said in a far-off voice as she followed her sister's gaze. Take as long as you need. Janie expected to feel nervous as she made her approach, but she didn't. Instead, she felt concerned, worried about one of her father's patients. Worried about Matt on her own account, if she was honest. Do you mind if I join you? She asked, and he looked up at her in surprise. Go ahead, he said and smiled at her, patting the large expanse of a hay bale that was going spare next to him. He looked pleased enough to see her, but she realized at the same time that seeing her was absolutely the least of his concerns. He looked utterly exhausted, and even by the pale yellow gloom of the town barn, his skin looked gray. You're unwell, aren't you? She said, smiling at him weakly. I guess I let the guys talk me into coming tonight. That wild bunch over there, see? He said, smiling as he pointed over towards a group of young men dancing with ungainly exuberance in the center of the barn. They all work on the dairy farm, Janie, and I don't want to let them down. I'm sure they wouldn't see it as you're letting them down, Mr. Brooks. I'm sure they would be appalled if they thought they dragged you out when you're not up to it, she went on, although she felt a flash of annoyance for the young men who ought to have been able to see, just as she could, that Matt Brooks was certainly not well enough for this. Could you just call me Matt? Yes, all right. Janie felt a little out of her depth, realizing that she felt something for this handsome, sometimes cocky young man sitting at her side. Is it your head? The headaches are a little easier since your father gave me the powder. And the muscle rub? Is it working? Not really, he said and looked apologetic. I don't know, maybe I didn't explain my symptoms too well. Maybe I didn't even realize it myself, he said and shook his head. I don't think it's quite the case that my muscles are aching, Janie. It's like I ache deep down on the inside, down to my bones. Well, would you listen to me? I'm sure you didn't come all the way over here to listen to me complaining, he said and suddenly burst out laughing. Actually, I came all the way over here to find out how you are, Matt. Have you managed to get back out on the farm since I last saw you? A couple of times, yes. My dear old pa sends me back down to the house when I start flagging, he said and shrugged. Flagging? Like no energy, is that what you mean? That's exactly what I mean. I reckon by about mid-afternoon is when it's at its worst. The morning doesn't go by too badly, if I'm honest. Things start to get worse about an hour or so after we stop to eat at midday. Then it just gets gradually worse and worse until I can barely get up on my horse to take me back down to the farmhouse. His blue eyes looked dark, his face so dejected that Janie felt bad for every cross word between them. He was suffering, she could see that quite clearly. Matt, I think you'd better come in and see my father again first thing on Monday. I'll let him know that you're calling in. I know he's still waiting to hear from the laboratory in Denver, but maybe there's something else he can try. I appreciate that, Janie. But I think I'm going to head off now. He slowly got to his feet. I'm sorry, I'm not much company. Let me help, she began. I'm fine. I can still get myself home, but thank you for being such a gentleman, he said and laughed, and a tiny thread of her old annoyance began to creep in. Look, would you mind telling the guys when they've finally given up making fools of themselves up on the dance floor? No, of course not. I'll let them know. She rose to her feet also. You take care now. Will do, he said and sauntered away. Janie hovered by the dance floor for a while until one of the cattle herders who worked on the Brooks dairy farm staggered to the edge of the barn to get his breath. She hurriedly gave him the details, not wanting to be caught up in conversation for too long with a young man who, despite being utterly breathless, still had enough energy to look her up and down appraisingly. She just wasn't in the mood. "What's going on?" Marie asked the moment Janie rejoined her. "It's Matt Brooks, he was kind of unwell, I guess. Anyway, he should be coming in to see Daddy on Monday." "And he's gone home?" Marie said, seeming a little disappointed as she looked all around her. "I guess I kind of hoped the two of you were getting along all right," she added with a hint of mischief. "It's not really like that, Marie. I think he's really seriously unwell. He certainly wasn't well enough to be here tonight, and for a young man of just 26, that can't be a good sign," Janie said, and felt terrible. "You know Daddy will get to the bottom of it, he always does." Marie was trying to cheer her up, and she knew it. "Honey, you know you said that you wouldn't mind if I didn't stay. Of course, you go on home if you want to." Marie kissed her cheek. "And I know the poor man is not well, but I reckon it's kind of nice to see you caring about somebody again." "About a man, I mean," Marie added and kissed her again. "I'll see you later." "You have a nice time," Janie said brightly, deflecting her sister's observation with a smile. Chapter 7. Matt had felt a little better for the last few days and had almost tripped over himself to ride down into town to put in their order at the seed and feed merchant on the main street. He decided to get a little something in the diner before heading back and left his horse tethered by the merchant while he wandered up the street. Seeing Janie in the distance, he quickened his pace. She looked lovely, wearing a long-sleeved dark green dress. Her chestnut hair looked all the redder against it. It was a sensible dress, the kind of thing a professional young woman wore for a day's work in her father's medical practice, but it suited her. Janie Bamber was kind of serious, kind of sensible, but he didn't think she was anywhere near as cold as she tried to present herself. Matt reckoned he had a fair idea of what was going on with her. When he saw her approaching the door to the diner, he moved faster still, reaching the door at the same time she did. "Allow me," he said, reaching for the door handle and realizing when it was too late that her hand was already on it. She pulled her hand away as if his touch burned her, but he decided to put it down to the surprise. He was nothing if not an optimist, especially on a day when he felt a lot better. "Thank you," she said with a hint of exasperation he didn't entirely believe. He chose to remember instead that she'd made a point of sitting with him at the barn dance. Her concern had certainly been genuine. "Looks like we're going the same way," he said, standing back to let her walk into the diner. "I don't very often come in here, but sometimes it makes a nice change. I'm either in the doctor's office or the house, you see," she said, needlessly explaining her presence. "I guess that's almost my reason for being here. I'm either out on the farm or in the farmhouse." "When you're not at the barn dance," she said with some amusement. "Likewise," he retorted. "My father said you were a little better on Monday," she said, changing the subject. "Yes, I was already improving on Sunday, but I thought I ought to show up on Monday since you'd been so kind as to arrange it. I don't know, it might have been better if I'd still been ill, but at least your father listens. He's a good man," he said and meant it. "So, where shall we sit?" he asked and grinned when he saw her eyes widen. "Oh, come on, don't make me sit here drinking coffee on my own." "Anywhere," she said and shrugged. He led her over to one of the booths, and they sat themselves down. A waitress appeared almost immediately and they both ordered coffee and pie. "You're a strange sort of woman, Janie Bamber, do you know that?" he said when the waitress walked away. "Is that supposed to be a compliment?" she asked in such a flat tone that he burst out laughing. "I don't know how I managed to amuse you so much, Matt. I think it's because you managed to look concerned and vexed all at the same time. Still, it's an improvement on our first meeting, isn't it? I've already apologized for that, twice, so that's as much as you're going to get out of me. Oh, I know that, he said, still chuckling. And I wasn't looking for an apology anyway. So, what are you looking for? She looked directly into his eyes, and he had to pause for a moment in case he stumbled over his own words. Those pale blue eyes in such a beautiful face certainly had an effect on him, and he knew that it was only her own determination that had kept her unmarried. There were plenty of girls in the town of her age or even younger who were already either married or fixing to be married. I don't know, maybe just his name. He was hedging his bets. I beg your pardon, she said as her brow wrinkled in confusion. I just wondered if you were ever going to tell me his name, he went on, and realized now that he was committed to the sort of path which might see him with hot coffee down the front of his shirt. Whose name? Her cheeks had flushed now, and he was certain it was more anger than embarrassment. The name of the man who let you down so badly that you can't even let yourself like me when I'm giving it my very best shot, he said, and waited. He wished he could work out why it was he liked her so much. She was beautiful, no doubt about that, but there were a lot of beautiful women in the world, and none of them who occupied his thoughts as much as Janie did. And it wasn't even that he thought her a challenge with her standoffish ways, because he had seen her softer side and knew that it represented her far truer than her aloofness did. As far as he could see, her aloofness spoke only of some pain in the past. She held it out in front of her like a shield protecting her from a similar pain in the future. This is your best shot? She asked, surprising him by smiling. Being just about as annoying as you can possibly be is your very best shot, Matt? Mock me all you like, I know you're only swerving around the subject. There isn't a subject to swerve around. It must have been somebody back in Boston, because if it was somebody here, I'd already know. Oh, yes, that's right. I don't expect there are many secrets here in Blue Sky Falls. And there it was again, that animosity. I don't think it's the town you don't like, Janie. Or at least I think you decided you didn't like Blue Sky Falls before you even got here. You sound like my father. In fact, you sound like my whole family. She chewed at her bottom lip and narrowed her eyes until the pale blue almost disappeared behind her eyelashes. So, I'm right then? I don't talk about this. Why not? Because there isn't anything to talk about. If there isn't anything to talk about, why do you look so annoyed? He said, just as the waitress returned with their food. Janie immediately began to eat her apple pie, looking down at the plate as she did so and stoically ignoring him. He knew he'd pushed her too far, but now he wanted to know more than ever. He wanted to know if she was still in love with the man, whoever he was. And in wanting to know it, he realized, of course, that he didn't want her to be. You'll give yourself indigestion eating so fast, he said, amused. Well, I'm busy, and I have to get back to work. Your father seems like a reasonable man. I'm sure he wouldn't mind if you took the time to chew every mouthful. So, not only are you poking your nose into my personal life, but you're also making my digestive system your business too. She scowled at him and he burst out laughing. Sorry, I'm sorry, he said and held up his hands in front of him. But that was funny. That was real funny, he said, continuing to laugh. Well, I'm glad I amuse you so much. Come on, Janie, it's just a name. I have to get going, she said, leaving her pie half finished and her coffee with no more than a sip out of the cup. I'm glad you're feeling better, she added with a smile, and he could see it once again, that genuine care. All right, I'll be quiet. Look, finish your pie and coffee, and I won't say another word, I promise, he said gently, and she lowered herself back down into her seat cautiously. She picked up her fork and took another piece of the pie, chewing it more slowly this time. He wondered then what had happened back in Boston which had closed her down so completely, forcing her into her self-imposed exile from life. "I do wish you'd talk to me, though," he said, taking a risk. "You are impossible," she said, and dropped her fork onto her plate with a loud clang that had other diners turning to look. "Janie, don't go," he said, but she was already on her feet. "As I said, I'm glad you're feeling better," she said before marching out of the diner. Matt smiled to himself and shook his head before taking a sip of the bitter coffee. A sensible man would know when he was beaten, that was true, but Matt Brooks had never thought of himself as a sensible man, and he wasn't about to start now. Chapter 8. It was almost a week later when Matt Brooks' mother came into the consulting rooms. Janie hadn't seen Matt since the diner, deciding against going to the barn dance with her sister on Saturday night and choosing instead to sit at home reading a book in front of the fire. Janie hadn't wanted to see him again, not so soon, for he seemed to have the ability to look into her heart in a way that unsettled her greatly. So much of what he'd said was right, even though she had fended him off to the best of her ability. She hadn't answered a single question, and yet she knew, in her refusal, she actually had answered him. Without words, she'd made it abundantly clear that he was right, that somebody back in Boston had broken her heart and in doing so, had made her so wary. Matt had been right that she'd not allowed herself to like him even when his interest in her was so obvious. He'd kept trying even when she had been standoffish. Of course, she'd allowed her care for him to shine through now and again, and perhaps that was what gave him the confidence to continue. Despite her own determination, as she'd sat by the fire on Saturday night reading her book, she'd secretly hoped that the brighter, healthier Matt Brooks wasn't dancing with somebody else in the town barn. Realizing that her own emotional ebb and flow was confusing to her, Janie thought it was probably for the best that she never owned up to her feelings. It was all too complicated. However, the moment Mrs. Brooks came into the consulting rooms looking so distraught, Janie forgot her own emotional merry-go-round. The woman looked tearful, although she was doing her best to hide it, and Janie knew that something must surely be wrong. "What is it, Mrs. Brooks?" "It's Matt, he's taken to his bed." "My goodness, I only saw him a few days ago in the diner." "He looked so much better," Janie said, shaking her head and trying to get on top of her own worry. What on earth could make him so ill so quickly? "Is it his head?" "Not as much as before, he says the powder does help. The headache is still there, but it's not bothering him. Apart from a little pain in his stomach, he is not really in pain at the moment. It's all so confusing. It's as if somebody took a hold of him and wrung him out like a dishcloth. Every bit of energy is gone, and he can hardly lift his head to take a little milk. He's got no appetite, and his face is so gray. He'd be so angry with me if he knew I'd come here because, as always, he says he will be just fine tomorrow. But he won't be fine, Miss Bamber. I just want somebody to see him when he's at his worst, so they understand just how bad it can be," she finished and began to cry. Of course, Janie said and took Mrs. Brooks into her arms. "My father is on the far side of town with my mother. Mrs. McKellen has gone into labor, and I honestly don't know how long he'll be gone. But I can come with you now. I can speak to Matt and look at his symptoms and make sure I don't miss a single thing. Even if he improves tomorrow, I will have seen him, and I will be able to tell my father exactly what I saw." She sighed, realizing it was little enough for a mother who was so very worried. "Oh, would you? Would you really? I would be so very grateful, Miss Bamber." "What a kind girl you are," she said, surprising Janie with her gratitude. Of course. Why don't you go on ahead and I'll join you in about half an hour?" I just need to get one of my sisters to cover for me here in case somebody comes in. Thank you, Mrs. Brooks said and squeezed her hand before hurrying out. Shall I pretend I was just calling in on behalf of my father? Janie asked in a whisper when she let herself into the kitchen at the farmhouse. Would you? Goodness, you're clever as well as kind. He is a proud young man, and he wouldn't like to know I've interfered, Mrs. Brooks said in a breathless whisper. Why don't you take me up to his room? Mrs. Brooks squeezed her hand before leading the way. Pausing at the door of her son's room, Mrs. Brooks knocked lightly and popped her head around the edge. Are you awake, Matt? Yes, wide awake, he said, and Janie felt her heart squeeze. She knew immediately that he was putting on a jovial voice for his mother's benefit. You have a visitor, honey. Dr. Bamber's daughter has come out to check up on you. Mrs. Brooks did a very good job of pretense. I feel better already, he said with a chuckle as Mrs. Brooks gently edged Janie into the room. I'll make some tea, Miss Bamber. Mrs. Brooks disappeared. Well, come on in. How are you feeling, Matt? She asked, walking all the way into his neat but darkened bedroom. The drapes were closed tight against the bright sunshine of the day, and she wondered if that was to ease his head. This is for the doctor, so I want an accurate account. No hiding things from me. He chuckled a little. Exhausted, but otherwise not too bad, he said, giving a succinct report. He edged himself into an upright position, leaning back against his pillows, and Janie fought an urge to help him. He really was a proud man. My father's had word back from the laboratory in Denver, and it seems they cover all the tests that he would want them to do. So, he's going to take your blood this week. What day shall I come in? Don't come in, Matt. He'll come out to you. I know I look a bit pathetic today, Janie, but I can manage to get myself into town, I can assure you, he said a little standoffishly. There's no need to be so sharp, Matt, she said and sounded affronted. Matt started to laugh. Have you ever heard the old saying it takes one to know one? Oh, well, at least I've made you laugh. That's a start, I suppose, she said and shrugged. Looking around the room, she spied a wicker chair in the far corner and carried it across to his bedside. She sat down on it and tried to study him in the only light afforded by the closed drapes. You're a strange woman, Janie Bamber, I think I've already said that. 1 minute you're abandoning me in the diner, and the next, you're sitting by my bedside staring right at me. You really will have to make your mind up one of these days, I reckon, he said and chuckled, but there was no force behind it. He really was exhausted. How long have you been in bed? Just today. He shook his head and grimaced. It obviously hurt. Whenever I say something you don't want to hear, you change the subject, or you walk out. Have you had anything to eat today? There you go again, he said and snorted. Just answer the question, Matt, she said, her fear for him making her snappy. My stomach is hurting even more than my head. I haven't had anything to eat today, nor yesterday, but I've had plenty of milk. To be honest, I don't really want it, but I don't want to upset my ma either. She trundles up the stairs with a glass every hour, so I swallow it down and hope for the best. Well, at least you're having something, she said quietly. That's one of the benefits of living on a dairy farm. There's always plenty of milk to spare, he said and laughed again, sliding back down beneath the covers as if he couldn't even bear to sit up any longer. I'm so sorry, Matt. I'm so sorry we haven't got to the bottom of all this yet, but don't give up hope. My father is a good doctor, a really good doctor, and if anyone can find out what's happening, it's him. I know, he said and seemed to be drifting off into sleep. Thanks for coming out. And thanks for not embarrassing my ma by telling me that she was the one who came to get you. Is there anything you don't know, Matt Brooks? Not much, he said and finally closed his eyes. Janie kept her seat, not wanting to make a noise and disturb him in the early stages of slumber. Instead, she watched him, his proud, handsome face starting to relax as sleep pulled him down further and further. He really was a perceptive man, a man who took notice. In all the years she had known Dale Corby, he'd never once guessed what was going on in her head and heart. As far as she was aware, he hadn't even bothered to look. Of course, back then, in Boston, Janie didn't have anybody else to compare him to. But now, so many months later and almost 2,000 miles away, she had met somebody else. Somebody she'd known for just a matter of weeks but who already had managed to dig beneath her carefully crafted exterior. He might not know exactly what lay beneath, but he knew that there was something there to look for. Maybe her feelings for him weren't quite so confusing after all. Maybe they were very much clearer than she had been willing to admit. Janie stayed for another 10 minutes watching him sleep. His dark brown hair looked black against the white pillows, so adorably disheveled that she wanted to reach out and smooth it down. Instead, she looked at his handsome face and gave a silent prayer that her father would be able to get to the bottom of this. That he could do something to help the bright, handsome, somewhat annoying young man back to full health. Chapter 9. Are you all right, honey? Janie's mother asked the next day. You've been sitting there at the kitchen table for almost an hour, and you haven't said a single thing. I'm sorry, Mama, I guess I was miles away, Janie said. Miles away, as in Boston? Caroline Bamber asked cautiously. Boston? Janie said, somewhat confused. No, I wasn't thinking about Boston. I guess I was just worried about one of Daddy's patients is all. About Matt Brooks? Yes, Matt. It sure was kind of you to go and see him yesterday. I couldn't just leave him, not with you and Daddy out helping Mrs. McKellen have that baby of hers. I mean, I know I couldn't do anything, apart from just sit there, that is, but I wanted his mother to know that we care. You seem to like this young man, her mother said, gently fishing for information. I feel sorry for him, Mama. He's too young to feel so ill. Maybe it's a little bit more than that. Marie said that. Marie is just a romantic who wants to see me happily married. Janie rolled her eyes and laughed. The problem is, honey, I was expecting a sharp retort from you, and I got it. You've let this become a habit. I know you felt terrible when we left home, Janie, and I want you to know that it broke my heart to see it. It broke my heart more because you wouldn't speak to me, you wouldn't let me in, and it was my job to help you through it. Janie was surprised to see tears rolling down her mother's face. But if you won't let me be there for the bad times, please let me be there for the good. If you like this young man, if it makes your stomach twirl just to think about him, why can't you just admit it to me at least? That's what I'm here for. Mama, I'm so sorry, Janie said and got up from the kitchen table to embrace her mother. It just hurt so much that I couldn't speak, not at all. I know I turned away from everybody, but I felt so helpless. I was so certain that if I'd stayed in Boston just a little bit longer, that Dale and I would have patched things up, we might even have been married. I know it wasn't anybody's fault, truly I know that. But back then, it didn't stop me from being angry. I felt as if my choices had been snatched from me and they weren't mine to make anymore, and I knew I couldn't say that. You could have said that to me. I'm your mother, you can say anything to me, even if you think it's something I'm not going to want to hear. I just miss you so much. We all miss you so much. I'm sorry, Mama. You don't have anything to be sorry for, honey. Just come back to me, please. I will, I promise, Janie said and kissed her mother's cheek just as her father came home. He'd had a full appointment booked that day and had to make his way out to the Brooks dairy farm at the end of it to take the blood sample from Matt. Janie knew that he would still be none the wiser. The blood had only just been taken after all, but she had sat silently at the kitchen table waiting for news of him nonetheless. How did he seem? Not good, Janie. Probably not worse than he was yesterday when you saw him, but something seems to be attacking him from the inside. I don't know, it has me stumped if I'm honest. It might even be an allergy of some kind, something his body can't tolerate. Of course, this blood sample isn't going to tell me anything about that. He sighed and sat down at the kitchen table. Sorry I'm so late, honey, he said, smiling up at his wife. Not at all, I'm going to make dinner a little bit later anyway. At that moment, Carly and Susie, the youngest of the Bamber girls, came into the kitchen at high speed, followed by Scruffy the dog. They were obviously in the middle of some game, and Scruffy couldn't have been more excited about it, darting this way and that, running under the kitchen table and out again. Susie, what did I tell you about running around the house with Scruffy? You know if you want to play, you have to go outside, Caroline Bamber said with amusement thinly disguised as annoyance. I know, Mama, I'm sorry. We weren't meaning to play, I promise. I just wanted to give Scruffy something to eat. All right, put it in his bowl, and then take him outside. Yes, Mama, both Susie and Carly said at the same time. You don't think he'll die, do you? Janie asked in a whisper across the table to her father. I just can't believe he looked so well last week and so ill this week. Honey, I think we have a lot of things to try before we give up hope, Jonathan said kindly, casting a brief look at his wife. Perhaps he'd realized, as her mother had, that she had deeper feelings for Matt Brooks than she had owned up to. It's just that, Janie began before there was an awful retching sound, and the entire family fell silent. They turned as one to look as Scruffy vomited, the kitchen floor suddenly covered in the milk which Susie had just given him. Susie, not again. Jonathan said, a hint of exasperation in his voice. I told you before that Scruffy can't take milk. It doesn't agree with him, for some reason, his little belly can't tolerate it. I know, Daddy. Sorry, I forgot, Susie said, and her face crumpled as her tears began to fall. Poor Scruffy, she went on, her eyes full of unnecessary guilt. It's all right, he's all right, look, he said, pointing at the impossibly woolly brown dog who was already wagging his tail and licking his lips, waiting to be given something else instead. He's perfectly all right. Just try to remember in future that milk doesn't agree with him. Milk? Janie said in a far-off voice. Milk, she said again, and her father looked around at her. What is it? He said, frowning. Daddy, when I was with Matt yesterday, he said that he hadn't been eating. He hadn't eaten anything, but his mama was bringing him up a glass of milk every hour and that he drunk it down so that she could satisfy herself that he wasn't starving. And you know what he said? He said that's the good thing about living on a dairy farm, there's always plenty of milk. Maybe he's like Scruffy, Daddy. But maybe it affects him worse than it affects Scruffy. It's certainly a possibility. Dr. Bamber nodded his head and sat back down at the table as his wife supervised their two youngest daughters in cleaning up Scruffy's mess. Just don't go getting too excited and don't go raising that young man's hopes. An allergy would certainly explain his symptoms, that's true enough, but it's not a peg I want to hang my hat on just yet. Let's rule out one or two far worse possibilities with the blood test first, all right? But surely, I could mention it to him as a faint possibility, couldn't I? Maybe stop him drinking milk for a few days and see if it has any effect on him. I'm sure I could do that without getting his hopes up. Tears were forming at the back of her eyes, and she blinked them away. I just can't bear to see him suffering like this, and I think it's worth a try while we wait for the blood results. He told me once that he is better in the mornings, before he's eaten. It would be the longest he went without milk, she said, feeling suddenly so agitated that she wanted to set off for the Brooks dairy farm immediately. However, she knew she would have to wait until morning. She would have to wait until she had helped her father set up for the day before she could ride out across town to see him. And even then, she knew she'd have her work cut out getting a dairy farmer to agree to stop drinking milk. All right, as long as you promise to go about it gently and sensibly, you have my permission to speak to him about it, Dr. Bamber said, and smiled a smile that said he could see into her heart. Thank you, Daddy. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, she said, and leaned across the table to kiss his forehead. Anything to put a smile on your face, sweetheart. Chapter 10. You just can't stay away, huh? Matt said when Janie walked into his bedroom once more. If I'd known this was what it took to get your attention, I'd have taken to my bed a lot sooner. Matt, how are you feeling today? Janie asked, her mind so overtaken by the idea of his allergy that she was all business. Have you still got all the same symptoms? Yes, all the same. You look a little thinner, Janie said, pulling back the sheets a little and studying him. Hey, behave yourself, young lady. Matt said and chuckled. It's like I said, 1 minute you're ignoring me, the next. This is no time for your jokes, Matt, just listen to me, she said, and sat down on the wicker chair, which was still at his bedside. All right, I'm listening. Have you had anything to eat today? No, there's a kind of horrible gripping feeling in my stomach, and I'm just not able to eat anything. I'm sure it will be all right tomorrow. And the day after that, she said flatly. How do you manage to make your obvious care for me sound so annoyed? I honestly don't know, Matt. But tell me, how much milk have you drunk today? I don't know, a few glasses. To be honest, I'm sick to death of milk. Good, that's good, Janie said and nodded. How is that good? He asked and moved along the bed so that he was sitting up and looking straight at her. Janie could see that he looked a little worse, if that was possible. The skin around his eyes was dark, and the eyes themselves looked a little sunken. He was most certainly a little thinner, and she just hoped that he would be able to start eating again if he stopped drinking the milk. She knew it was a long shot, but she had an instinct that told her that it was a shot worth taking. It's good that you're sick of milk, Matt, because I really want you to stop drinking it. 1 minute, you're tearing at my bedsheets, and the next minute, you're trying to starve me to death, he said and laughed before stopping abruptly. Sorry, it's no time for my jokes. He gave her a mischievous grin, but she could see that behind it was a young man's grave concerns for his own continued existence in the world. Why do you want me to stop drinking milk? Because I think there's a possibility that it doesn't agree with you. Milk agrees with everybody. Everybody drinks milk, Janie. No, milk doesn't agree with everybody. It doesn't agree with Scruffy for a start, she said and winced, knowing already that Matt was going to be too amused by the story of Scruffy to listen to her properly. Scruffy? He's our dog, Matt. She let out a long sigh. Your dog? Your dog doesn't like milk. So you think that I shouldn't drink it either? Stop mocking me, I'm here to help. And one day, Janie, you'll realize that I'm not mocking you, that I've never mocked you. One day you'll realize that I've been able to see your sadness all along, and all I'm trying to do is make you smile. One day you will thaw out, I hope, and listen for long enough for me to be able to tell you how I feel about you. But if you want to carry on snapping at me every opportunity you get, you do just that. I can wait, he winked at her. Last night, my little sister gave Scruffy a bowl of milk. Within a few minutes, he brought it all back up again and my father told Susie off for giving it to him in the first place. Apparently, he's already told her that Scruffy's little system can't tolerate milk. Either it's too rich for him or there's something in the milk that just doesn't agree with him. Now, where's the harm in humoring me? You never know, it might even make me smile, she said and gave him the briefest little smile, like a promise of things to come. All right, I'm listening, he said and nodded slowly. Firstly, my father said I'm not to get your hopes up, she said firmly. All right, I'll leave my hopes exactly where they are. Secondly, before Scruffy was sick everywhere, my father was saying that your symptoms were as if you were being attacked from the inside. As if you had an allergy to something. His only worry was that, if that were the case, it certainly wouldn't be picked up on the blood tests. However, the blood tests do look for all manner of other things which are a heck of a lot more serious, so he's going to wait patiently for those results to come back. But in the meantime, he's allowed me to speak to you about the possibility of giving up milk for a couple of days and seeing what happens. And you think that will help, really help? He asked, and despite the fact that he'd said he had left his hopes right where they were, she could see it in his eyes. He was already thinking of a future in which he felt so much better than he did today. I don't know, but I think it's worth trying. You told me a couple of weeks ago that you tend to feel worse in the afternoon. What is it that you have to eat at midday? Bread, cheese, and I guess milk, he said and shrugged. So, milk. And cheese, which is made from milk, she said and chewed at her bottom lip thoughtfully. What do you generally have for breakfast? My ma likes to fuss over us, so we normally get bacon, eggs, tomatoes, bread, and butter. Oh, yes, and coffee, of course. And how do you take your coffee? Just as it is. Just black. Do you not see what I can see? Apart from the butter, there isn't much by way of milk products at breakfast time, but then you get to midday, and you have butter and cheese with your bread and swallow it down with milk. I just think it's worth trying, Matt. Please, she added the last beseechingly. All right then, I'll give it a go. But I'll give it a go on one condition. He narrowed his eyes, and she could see one corner of his mouth turning up, getting ready to grin at her. What's your condition? That as soon as I'm feeling better, you'll come with me to the barn dance. Not meet me there, not scowl at me across the room from your hay bale, but walk in through the doorway on my arm. Oh, yes, and dance with me too, that's part of my condition. Matt, that's not just one condition, that's a whole bunch of conditions all knitted together, Janie said, and, try as she might, she couldn't stop herself from laughing. I guess you really are giving it your best shot after all. It's me or the milk, you have to choose, he went on, and there was just a little color in his cheeks from the amusement. All right, I choose you, this time. If you go without milk for at least a week, I'll go to the barn dance with you. And I promise I will help you forget old what's-his-name. Who? There, see, you're forgetting him already, Matt said and grinned at her. Chapter 11. Come on in, Matt, come on in. Janie looked up from her desk when her father opened the door of the consulting rooms to none other than Matt Brooks. My goodness, he's looking well, he went on, turning to get Janie's attention. I'm feeling well, Doc, Matt said with a broad smile. How long have you been up and about? Dr. Bamber went on. 3 days already. I guess I've been off the milk for 5 days. He turned to give a broad smile to Janie. I don't want to tell you your business, Dr. Bamber, but I reckon that daughter of yours has cracked it. I know I have good days and bad days, and it's been that way for a long, long time, but this is different. I feel like a different man altogether. I feel like I used to feel a long time ago. Well, I sure am glad to hear that, because your blood test results are back, and they haven't found a single thing. I mean, that's good news, of course. You don't have some desperate condition, Dr. Bamber said and laughed. But even better news, I think that the changes to your diet seem to be working. I'm confident, I must admit. But did you ever hear of anything like this before? Apart from Scruffy, obviously, Matt said, and Janie's father started to laugh. Now and again, yes. Not milk exactly, but all manner of things. The problem is finding what doesn't agree with you. There isn't any way of finding out other than trial and error, and I guess it's just good fortune that Scruffy coughed his milk up all over the kitchen floor when he did. I haven't had any butter or cheese either, but my appetite is back and better than ever. Well, I would say to stay off all milk products for a while and see how you feel. If you really continue to improve like this, you can try and introduce a little butter here and there. Do that for a week and see how you go. If things stay good, you could try a little sliver of cheese. As for milk, I think it would be safer to avoid that altogether. Well, I haven't felt this healthy in years. I'm more than happy to be the only dairy farmer for miles around who doesn't drink his own milk. Keep monitoring it, keep doing what you're doing, and come back to me in a week. I want to be sure that you continue to improve. I will do, Doc, thank you, he said and turned to look at Janie. Now then, I kept up my end of the bargain, Miss Bamber. With her father standing right there, Janie blushed scarlet. She looked up from her desk at him in a somewhat pleading manner, but he shook his head firmly. No way, you promised. What's this? Dr. Bamber asked with some interest. Your daughter promised me she would come to the barn dance with me if I laid off milk for a week. Well, by Saturday, it will be more than a week, he laughed good-naturedly, and Janie was amused to find that her father laughed too. A deal is a deal, Janie, her father said with a broad and hopeful smile. Yes, all right, she said and shook her head as if in exasperation, all the while realizing that she was utterly thrilled by the prospect of walking into the barn dance on his arm. So, I'll pick you up from the house at 7? Matt said, his smile slow and handsome. Yes, 7, she said, still blushing and wishing that he would go just to release her from the awkwardness. As soon as he left, Janie made a show of getting back to work. She had only one file on her desk, and she knew she looked ridiculous opening and closing it as if she had some real purpose. He's a good man, her father said, crouching down in front of her desk so that he could make eye contact with her. And I think you like him, don't you? I do like him, Daddy, but I'm afraid to like him. I don't want to always have the feeling that I'm letting Dale down, that I'm betraying him. But, you're not betraying him, honey. I know he could have come back to me before we left Boston, but what if all he needed was a little time? He didn't want time, Janie. I'm really sorry, but he already had somebody else, honey. I just didn't want to tell you. I didn't want to add to all your pain. But you're not betraying him, not for a minute. He's moved on and it's time that you did too. It was Janet Myers, wasn't it? Janie said and screwed her face up. Yes. I think a part of me knew it all along. That's why he didn't want to patch things up, I guess. I guess, her father said and nodded, reaching across the desk to take her hands in his. But it's time to let go of all the sadness, isn't it? Just picture Dale Corby in your mind and then picture Matt Brooks. Now then, which one of them makes you happiest? Matt, she said without waiting a heartbeat. He's so funny, Daddy. Even when I'm scowling at him, he finds something funny in it. He never takes offense, and he knows, even though I haven't told him a single thing, that I only snap and snarl sometimes because I was feeling so sad. Dale would never have realized that much about me without my telling him. After all that time, he never ever knew me as well as Matt does now. Then it looks as if everything really has worked out for the best, doesn't it? I guess it has, she said and smiled, a tear rolling down her cheek. But it wasn't a tear of sadness, nor even happiness, just relief. In finally letting go of Dale Corby, Janie felt lighter than air. Lighter than air, and so excited by the prospect of going to the barn dance on Saturday with just about the most handsome young man she'd ever set eyes on. Maybe Blue Sky Falls isn't such a bad place after all? I reckon you could be right there, Daddy. I reckon I could grow to love Blue Sky Falls if I put my mind to it. I never had you down as a good dancer, Janie, Matt said when the two of them walked breathlessly from the dance floor to claim a hay bale at the back of the barn. You do realize that's not particularly complimentary, don't you? Janie said and laughed. I'm going to make it even worse by saying I never realized you were so much fun, he went on, shrugging and grinning all at once. He took her hand and led her to the only available hay bale, and they sat down on it side by side. He looked so handsome, so nicely dressed, and so very, very healthy. I guess I haven't been much fun since we arrived here in Blue Sky Falls, Matt. And you were right, there was somebody back in Boston, somebody who hurt me. The problem was, I wouldn't admit that he had. In my heart, I knew he had somebody else, but I tried to convince myself that it was nothing more than our move to Blue Sky Falls, which had torn us apart. I suppose my pride got the better of me, not to mention the fact that I didn't want to make myself feel any worse than I already did. If it makes you feel any better, I can tell you just how many women have walked away from me, he said, putting his arm around her shoulder and drawing her in close to him. Matt, she said and began to laugh. I'm serious, it's quite a list. You're not the only one who finds me annoying, you know. He kissed the top of her head, and the feeling seemed to pulse right through her body, all the way down to her toes. I don't really find you annoying, Matt. I think I liked you straight away, and it scared me. You know, I really am sorry that I was so snappy with you, so aloof for so long. There's nothing to apologize for. I liked you anyway, and we're here now, aren't we? I've got my arm around your shoulder and you haven't kicked me off the hay bale yet, so I reckon it's all good. I reckon it's all good too, she said and turned to look into his bright blue eyes. He leaned forward then, and she knew he was going to kiss her. He took his arm from around her and laid a hand on either side of her face, drawing her towards him. And when he kissed her finally, it felt like the very first kiss of her life. What she'd had with Dale back in Boston seemed like child's play in comparison, and she realized there and then that she had so much to be grateful for to her old pain and grief. It was that pain and grief which had brought her right into the arms of Matt Brooks, and she would always, always be thankful for that. Epilogue. So, I'd like to thank you all for being here today to celebrate our wedding. I'd always hoped, from our very first meeting, that this was where we'd end up. From that very first icy glance that Janie gave me, I knew I was sunk, Matt said as his wedding guests laughed. I'd promised Janie that I would keep my speech simple, so I won't go on for too long. But I just want to say that when a man is snapped at and turned away so many times but keeps trying, that's when he realizes he's in love. Matt, Janie said in a loud whisper that everybody could hear, and everybody was amused by. She knew there was no stopping him. He was a cheeky, confident young man, and he was enjoying himself. And Janie was enjoying herself too, knowing that she had her whole life ahead of her with this wonderful, handsome, funny man. But she finally thawed out just long enough to say yes, just long enough to make me the happiest man in the world. And so I want you all to raise a glass to my beautiful wife, my wonderful Janie, the woman who walked into Blue Sky Falls and got my attention, made me fall in love, and rescued me from milk. There was another titter of amusement. To Janie, he said, raising his glass high. To Janie, the celebrants chorused as one. I should have known your speech would be a cheeky one, Matt, Janie said when the two of them began to dance together. They were a well-liked couple, and Janie's father had been so pleased that his daughter had overcome her sadness and thrown herself into life again that he had laid on a wonderful wedding celebration feast in the town barn for all to enjoy. You know I'm never mocking, don't you? You know I only ever want to make you smile. He held her closer still as they danced. I know. She rested her head on his shoulder. And now you smile all the time, and I feel like the luckiest man in the whole world. I smile all the time because of you, Matt. I smile all the time because I am the luckiest woman in the whole world. I love you, Janie. I love you too, Matt, she said and lifted her head from his shoulder so that he could kiss her. Thank you for listening to Indiana Wake's audiobooks. If you enjoyed these stories, don't forget to subscribe to Indiana Wake and Friends so you never miss future free audiobooks.